until I left for soil erosion, and Greg got the last call on my way out the door.
Is this on the brownfield?
People wonder why I occasionally unplug the phone.
Not gonna cause any problems.
That's good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think this needs your signature.
Okay.
I don't see any city people.
This one's so cool. It will take my
That was easy. Okay.
full house. It'll take my pulse.
You could have left it here. I know my stuff.
Take my pulse. Dear.
Good.
See how healthy you are. How you doing?
It says it's not doing it. Here, wait. It says keep still and quiet. It's not going to work. Yes, I do. Pardon? What?
Jen's thing.
I think so. That's the time I have in my
Did I get all my shit?
In about a minute, we'll be calling the meeting to order. Just give you a heads up.
That finger looks like E.T.
I think it's too loud in the room. It won't do it. Did it earlier though.
It's at 1 to 2:30. Downstairs, right? We're gonna do it in the cafeteria.
That was in the training room.
Jen's is in the training room.
Yeah. Yep. It's at 2.
1
It's 1 to 2:30. Yep.
That's crazy. I love it though.
Adjust my chair down.
That's
Shake it.
that's an expensive trip. You have to remember to lower your chair for you.
Oh, I thought both of them were going.
Just the older one.
So you used to do that to us all the time.
$1,700. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Expensive 3 nights or 4 nights or whatever. Oh yeah.
All right.
In one of the most
Okay.
expensive places in the country.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of Wednesday, March 18th, Ways and Means Committee to order. We'll start opening ceremony with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next thing on the docket is roll call, please.
Commissioner Klaus?
Here.
Crawford?
Here.
Johnson?
Here?
Kropa?
Here.
Max Bauer?
Here.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Lathrop?
Here. The next thing is approval of minutes for February 18th, 2015.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the minutes of February 18th, 2015.
Is there a second?
Support.
Is there any discussion? Okay, the minutes stand approved. Now it's time for first public comment. Alana?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4 Order of Business. However, public comment will generally be received at any time during the meeting regarding a specific topic currently under discussion by the board. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson.
Okay, is there anybody that would like to make a public comment at this time? Please don't be shy.
Justin Reed, 630 Kaji Drive, Apartment 1B. I would like to address the County Board of Commissioners, not County Board of Commissioners, this is the County Board of Commissioners meeting. I'd like to address the board about the letter that Mayor Estes is giving to you about the Brownfield grant. It's ironic that there's a housing commission, well, there's a housing authority and commission that there's a task force for the city that they have right now. And putting this brownfield grant towards condominiums isn't the answer. It should be spent on trying to find housing for low income, medium housing, and high end housing. I think it's just not right to spend a grant on public money for SOCs and or condos. I think that's wrong. But thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, then we'll close public comment, and the next thing is approval of agenda. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to remove item 7A from the agenda. As you'll notice, the mayor is not in attendance of our meeting. He has been contacted, and in conjunction with him, we have decided that it would be best to have this discussion at a later time after we've had the opportunity to gather more information between all the parties involved. So he agreed to not be here this evening.
Okay, so there's been a motion to remove item 7. Is there a second?
I'll support.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Now we come to consent calendar, and that stars you again, Lana.
Wait, you got to approve the agenda.
Oh, you're right. Thank you, I'm glad you're right here. So, can we have a motion to approve the agenda with the exception of item 7?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Okay,
support her.
There's a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now, Lana, thank you.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one committee motion without discussion. Any member of the committee, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file, none. B, approval, 1, Garfield Tax Map Agreement.
Okay, is there anyone on the board that wants to remove an item from the consent calendar? Is there anyone in the audience? Okay, then can we have a vote to accept the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar is provided.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Accepted. Okay, we don't have a special order of business. We don't have any items removed from the consent calendar, so the next thing is human resources.
Good evening, Jen Seaman, County Human Resources Director, and I am here tonight to ask for reclassification of one of the positions in my office, which is Sally Dreves' position. In my office, there are a total of 5 employees, including myself. There are 2 HR technicians, and then a secretary and an office clerk. There used to be a deputy director in the Human Resources office, and that position, I think it's even over maybe 10 years, close to 10 years ago, have not had that position since then. So a lot of the duties that the deputy director used to do have been absorbed by Sally. Excuse me. She handles a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities in the Human Resources Department, but one of her main responsibilities is dealing with the budget process and the annual budget process. She enters in all of the wage and fringe benefit information into the personnel system. So that includes your health, your dental, your vision, your life insurance, your disability, as well as the wage increases. So there's a lot of She spends a lot of time on this. Accuracy and integrity of this data is very important, and we rely on her heavily for this. Dean and Dave both work with Sally very intensely during the budget process, call upon her for reports. She's really an asset to them as well, especially during the budget time. So that's one of her main responsibilities. The other one that the deputy director used to do would be handling our, excuse me, the administering the health insurance and our other benefit programs. So Sally does all this. Our benefits are well over $5 million, so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with managing these programs that we have here at Grand Traverse County. When I am out of the office, Sally is relied upon as the person that is in charge as well. So she's handling a lot of these responsibilities already. What I am asking for is for her to be reclassified to an HR analyst. And that would be an increase for her for $1.19 an hour. So it's a position that's already been graded. It's already in our classification plan. It's just not being used at the present time, and that is what I'm looking for Sally. Also, the money can be covered in my budget for this year. We have had a vacancy in the other HR technician, and there is enough money there to cover this increase for this year, so there is no extra money that would needed to be added to my budget for this year. And that is a summary of the information that I have provided.
Thank you, Jan. Any comments or questions from the board? Yes.
Jen, with just not understanding all of the added expenses when someone gets a raise, the $5,300 that is part of the benefits or the defined benefit pension, the unfunded liability, is that still there even if she doesn't get this raise and you're just looking at it that
Correct.
regardless, this is something we're paying for anyway?
Correct, and Dean or Dave chime in if I take you down the wrong path, but it's basically, right now it's allocated to one group, and she would be moving to another group, and so that's what's impacting the unfunded liabilities that are coming with her when she moves over into the group. That's the easiest way for me to explain it.
And that's correct. What happens, there are different unfunded liability components depending on the contract, the labor contract, and they're not the same. Some have a larger unfunded liability, and for 2015, we actually have the full cost of that pension liability. It's already in the budget, but when we cost the positions, we include all of the costs that would be allocated. So it's not necessarily a real number, but when we look at these or bring this information to you, we always include that cost so that we're looking at the position costs in the same manner. So for 2015, our liability is actually a fixed amount with the retirement system, and this would be a budget number only.
Does that make any sense?
It does. And just tell me this.
I understood what he meant, but I didn't know if you did.
Just tell me this, just for my simple mind, is that if we didn't approve it, if we didn't approve that $1.19 an hour increase, the $5,300 is still there. It's just in a different department.
Right.
So, okay.
There's a piece that's allocated that's part of a defined benefit plan, and then there's a piece that's part of the legacy costs of being in that plan. And the part that's legacy doesn't disappear. It doesn't matter if you could eliminate the position, that number would still have to be paid by the county.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Makes sense?
I have one. What is the actual net increase? I know it's just $1.19 an hour with benefits and everything. Is there what's the change for a year for the county?
It's right on the second page as well there for you. There's as we were talking about, the unfunded liability portion is $5,300, and then there's another $2,700, bringing the total to $8,000. But as we were discussing, that $5,300 is there no matter what.
So the 2,700 involved, that includes your salary increase
That's
too?
about 19.
Correct. That would include your FICA, your taxes,
Okay.
all of that, fully loaded.
So just from my education, could we give her the raise without giving her a change in position?
No, the position that she's currently in is allocated to a certain pay grade. She's at the top of that pay grade.
I see.
This position is in a higher pay grade.
Okay.
So she can't go any higher than she is currently in the current pay grade. And I believe that the work that she's doing is actually higher than her current pay grade.
Okay. And one more question for you.
Sure.
I know that you're going to be leaving and that we'll be hiring a new person. I'm just wondering, would a new person, I wonder about making a change when we're going to bring a new person in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been waiting to do this for quite some time, and we just haven't been able to. Honestly, as I mentioned, Sally takes the responsibility when I'm out of the office. Okay. So you're still going to need somebody in that role, even with a new department head. There is a pretty big gap between the department head and then the current HR technician.
Gotcha.
Yeah, without having a deputy director or even anybody there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sonny?
Mr. Chairman, I would, because we should have the motion before we have the discussion, I'm going to make a motion to add a human resource analyst and to delete one human resource technician to the HR department staff.
Support.
Okay, there's been motion and support, now discussion. Sonny?
Okay. First, I've said this dozens of times, this is not the way to do a reclassification study. It's simply not the right thing to do. We shouldn't do these one at a time, and because we end up looking at them in a vacuum instead of looking at the overall picture. We also have to remember that when we do this, when we make this staffing plan change, this has truly nothing to do with Sally. This is a change to the staffing in the HR department. And when we talk about it from the financial standard, we shouldn't talk about it with Sally's wages either. Because the fact is that if Sally decides to retire next week, all of these numbers change. I certainly give Sally all the credit in the world for what she does, because I think she's a very important part of that department. But even though I do not think it's the right way to do this, I will support this motion, obviously because I made it. But the fact is very simple. This is not the right way to handle reclassification studies.
Well, I just simply couldn't disagree with you more.
I know.
If I tried.
That's why we've been fighting about it for 6 years and still haven't fixed it.
You spent $180,000 on a salary study, wage and salary study that was not worth the paper it was printed on. That having been said, what sells me, I will be the first person to tout Sally's expertise. She's excellent at her job. That's not why I'm supporting this. I'm supporting this in part because of something Sonny said and what I read here, and that is when you are out of the office, she is in effect acting as deputy director. Whether Sally chooses to retire tomorrow, I do believe that that's an important role, because when we have your replacement in the office, someone is still going to need to do that. And I believe that this is the appropriate way to bring this classification forward. So I am supporting your motion, even though I disagree with your reasonings, Commissioner Wheelock.
Okay, any more discussion?
I do agree with Commissioner Max Bauer on this. I agree with Commissioner Wheelock, though, too. Living in a vacuum doesn't do anybody any good. But what it boils down to is when we hit our budget crisis, not once but twice since the year 2000, We have cut employees, kept them at old pays, not reclassified. All of us appreciate that this is a problem. But what I will direct you to is the simple fact that even if we eliminated this position, we're carrying $5,000 a year in unfunded liability with this position. And if you really, truly want to look in a vacuum, you need to attack the problem, which is the unfunded liability. But I ask the staff to bear with us and let us do exactly what Jen has done. She's done exactly what we said. And that's, we would love to do a reclassification. We would love to do the across-the-board millions of dollars of wage increases that they'll say, but we simply can't. And why can't we? Well, we need to take any of that extra money and put it towards our unfunded liability so we can stop carrying that extra number. You should be coming to us asking for a $2,700 increase. You're asking us for an over $8,000 increase. Why? Because we're carrying along the dead weight of the unfunded liability that goes on and on and on year after year. So I will support this, and I will support any department head coming forward, helping us pay back and appreciate the staff that has bear with us through the pension liability and done above and beyond their classification, and now is the time to reward them. We don't have the money to put towards the study. We don't have the money to put towards a reclassification, but we do have some money to put towards wage increases, and we have made good on our word. We have already done it for now 3 departments. This is how you reward employees that have stuck with us, and hopefully they'll help be a part of the team that will end the problem with the pension liability, and we can stop looking at that number, because it's ridiculous to be talking about an $8,000 wage increase when our employee only sees $2,700 of it.
Any other comments? I'd like to make one kind of about this. We were mentioning giving Chris Kramer a raise. Did we actually do that yet?
It's on the agenda.
Pardon?
It's on the agenda.
Today? Oh, cool. I want to make sure we do that. All right. All right. Any more comments on this? And there's a motion. Was there a second? Mm-hmm. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? A motion carries.
Thank you.
Now we go to Central Dispatch.
Good evening, Jason Torrey, Deputy Director 911. First on the agenda is the Next Generation 911 Technical Consultant recommendation. We asked to form an RFP back in November. The Board of Commissioners at that time approved that request, worked with Don Sheehan, got that on the street, got the return back, as you can see in the agenda item, on February 4th. The evaluation team went through them, immediately discounted 2. One was extremely overpriced, and one was the quality of their response wasn't adequate. We went through a further evaluation and follow-up with the 2 remaining firms, and we came to the conclusion that Empiric Solutions would meet the needs that we're looking for.
Okay. Board? Yes.
I will make a motion to approve and negotiate a contract with Empiric Solutions, Inc. to provide NG 911 technical services for an amount not to exceed $38,000.
Motion by Kropa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Crawford. Discussion.
Our 911 board did unanimously support this.
Okay.
Is this going to be part of is this in a budget anywhere? Is this part of the 911 surcharge? Will it be wrapped in that?
The surcharge, it would be an appropriate expenditure for the surcharge monies.
Yeah, and the whole point is to do the analysis of the equipment needs and make sure that we're buying the right equipment and, in logical progression for what we should buy. So-
Right. Chris Forsythe did have an opportunity to review the contract, already got that in his hands, and he did go over that, and he was okay with it. My goal here, or the department goal, will be to get this person on board Empiric Solutions next month. We want to get this thing rolling as soon as possible. What we'd like to do is bring back a comprehensive package about how we want to progress through this process and where we want to end up. We don't want to piecemeal or bring, hey, we want to go this RFP and that RFP. We want to bring a comprehensive plan back to this board so you understand what we're trying to do.
Sonny?
Yeah, that's me. I always have my name on my shirt because sometimes I can't remember who I am. Jason, I'm only concerned when I'm reading the bid packet. I've got one bid at $358,000, I've got one bid at $51,000. I've got one bid at $167,000. And then I've got a bid from Empiric that says $18,500 to $38,000. You know, that's quite a range. You know, I read bid packets quite regularly, and I don't usually see a bid packet that has 100% range in it.
Yeah, we had the same discussion. The $358,000 bid, they're an Ontario, Canada-based company. They do mega multi-million dollar type projects all the time, and I'm not sure if they were just throwing something out there to see if we'd bite on it. The $167,000 bid, they were one of the two remaining firms that we did a follow-up on an evaluation for. And one of the things I went over with them was the fact that we don't necessarily need someone to come in here and do everything for us. These folks don't have any Michigan clientele. They would have to fly these folks in from Texas. There's a $9,000 a day expense, I think, associated with that. But at the end of the day, what they wanted was to come in and do exactly that. They wanted to come in, develop, manage it, and see it all the way from start to finish, and then head back to Texas, is how we took that. That's not in the best interest of Grand Traverse County. Empiric Solutions, IT firm that works regularly with other 911 centers in the region, so they're regularly servicing some of our surrounding counties, being CCE 911 Center, Missaukee County at Seago, Kalkaska. They're here, they're local. We certainly feel that they're going to benefit us at the end of the day. I don't have a really good explanation for why those bids are all over the place.
I wasn't questioning what I was reading as far as their qualifications and their scoring. It's just, you know, obviously there's a big difference between $167,000 and $18,000.
Right.
But more importantly to me is, why do I have a $20,000 range in what their bid is?
Well,
I don't understand that.
It's going to depend on the level of involvement that they have in participating in the process that we'd like them. See, some of these next generation 911 technologies, we can handle them in-house for the most part. We just need someone to review our recommendation and make sure that what we're trying to do is compliant with I3 recommendations and NENA standards. We don't necessarily need them to come in here and develop something and monitor it and see it from start to finish. So what they're doing is saying on the low side, if we have little involvement in a certain process, we're going to charge less. And obviously, if we have more involvement in a process, it'll be a little bit more. So it's by the hour. So they said on the low side 18 and on the high side 38.
Any more discussion? Okay, I've had a motion, I've had a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Let's do a roll call.
Crawford?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Kropa?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Wheelock?
No.
Klaus?
Yes.
Lathrop?
Yes.
And I would like to comment, I would just like to see what exactly we're getting for this money, because I don't see it in this packet that I have. And when I got a $20,000 range of, well, it depends on how much they're involved. Well, does that also depend on what quality that I'm going to end up with an in package? So that's the reason I voted no.
Thank you. The next thing on the item is backup generator discussion.
At the central board, I brought up the fact that the generator that services this building, and specifically 911 and our IT department, is extremely old. Danny Brown's here tonight to help support this effort, but it's imperative that that thing works, because if we're out of power and our UPS goes out after about 45 minutes, we're dead in the water. At least twice over the last 6 weeks, that generator has malfunctioned and the parts are hard to come by, and it has been in an inoperable condition in which it would not run if we ran out of power. So we are in a situation where if we had a power outage, we had 45 minutes of UPS power, and then your 911 center and all your IT department would be completely dead in the water. So it's more of an awareness issue for us. Danny Brown might be able to follow up with more detail, but I do know that I think he submitted a letter to you before this meeting. I'm not sure if you got that, but it does detail how much they've spent so far repairing the generator. And it identifies as 37 plus years old. We just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Any questions or discussion from the board?
I was the one that placed this on the agenda during our 911 meeting, because it seemed important to every member on that board, the different fire chiefs and police chiefs that we have on that board. I think we're surprised to hear of this situation. We were glad it was brought forward, and they said, can we put it on immediately? And I emailed you and Chris Kramer, and she was able to come downstairs and said it was time Thursday morning, we could still fit it on the agenda. Because I think it is, you know, when do we most likely have power outages? It's during a weather emergency. When do we most likely have 911 inundated? During a weather emergency. I feel like this should be addressed now. I said to Commissioner Maxbauer, I asked her about this when we were here prior to the meeting, because she did sit on the board during this time, and it's truly my belief that this timeline is the Board of Commissioners' fault. I think this slipped through the cracks, and now it's time to pick up the pieces and do what's responsible for the community. It is obviously a significant expense, but the expense put forward in repairs overwhelms that, along with the fact that now we're getting parts for it. What is it, like there's an old generator in Arkansas or something?
Texas, I think.
Texas.
Right.
So we can buy old parts off of that, and that's how we're operating our generator for our 911 system and our IT at the county. I think it's irresponsible to not address this immediately, so that was why I put it on, so I appreciated your help with that and Danny's help. I know he had to scramble real quick. I talked to you that day. But this isn't just talking about a roof that needs replacing or some old carpet. This is our 911 system in an emergency. I think it bears weight.
Anybody else? Yes,
I just want to throw out there that we talked about this at our management meeting on March 4th. Danny brought it to my attention that he is, trying to find parts for this. He found some in Texas. Well, and then we had a discussion about the generator itself. 37 years old, it was like, we need to replace that now. Let's get on it and get moving. So,
And that was,
it
I
all
think, where
kind of
this
came
conversation
together.
came from. Yeah.
Yeah, we're already in process to replace it. Danny's got some information for us tonight, I think. He has budget figures from the past year, but he doesn't have quotes. He's going to have to go out and get quotes. What you want to add to this?
Yeah. Danny Brown, I'm the Director of Facilities for Grand Traverse County. Yes, I've got some numbers. Like Elisa said, I've been scrambling to get these numbers too. But we're putting them together. But what I'd like you folks to do is direct me. Do you want me to get on it? I mean, immediately? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yes.
exactly what I'll do. I'll move forward. Now, this is going to be about a 4 or 5 month process to actually put a new generator online. So there's a lot of steps to this. And I'm going to have to rent a generator on a trailer to do the changeover, because I got to take one out and put one in and so on and so forth. So there's wiring involved, there's pads to be poured, there's a crane to be commissioned, and then we're still scratching our heads as how we're going to get to it. It's in a funny place, to say the least. But I think if we can get a big enough crane, we can make it happen.
Danny, is that generator behind the building?
Yes, well, it's on the west side of it. It's where the land kind of slopes down to the river. That was another hurdle that we had to cross quickly. To go through the DEQ to see what they're going to require of us and how close we can get to that water with diesel fuel. That was the question, and we, because of the amount of diesel fuel that the generator's going to set on top of the tank, currently it's not that way. We have a separate tank for this generator, the existing, but the new one would set on top of the tank, and because of the amount of the fuel, we don't have to comply with some of their rules and regulations, thank goodness, because some of them are pretty stringent.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Well, one of the things, that we need to talk about, we haven't been totally remiss about this because we talk about our annual improvement maintenance thing every year as part of the budget process. But I would note that when we replaced the generator at the jail, and Danny will remember, one of the real discussions we had was with the fuel situation. And, you know, the generator is rated to hold, I don't remember, 500 gallons or
800.
something, like 800 gallons of fuel, which would run it for hours and hours and hours. And it was determined that we were better off for our purpose to put a much smaller amount of fuel in it rather than have stagnant old fuel in that thing when when an emergency came and it did have to be used. You know, we have a number of suppliers in our community that could fill that tank within an hour's notice if we did have to put it online for a long-term basis. And I'm guessing that this generator is bigger than the one that's at the jail, so.
No, it's actually smaller.
Is it smaller?
The one at the
KW is
jail
smaller?
is 350 kW. This is only 100.
Oh, so it
the government
really does
number.
have limited usage. But anyway, around it, there are things that we can do as part of this purchase, which doesn't necessarily make the bottom line quite as bad. You know, when we think about simple things like, you know, what's 800 gallons of diesel fuel cost us? You know, and so there's some of those things. So, yeah, that corner's going to be hard to get around to with a crane.
Yeah, and we may have to cut a tree or two to do it, so.
You know, it's been there a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Commissioner Klaus?
Danny, why aren't we looking at natural gas, or you can't get one big enough, a generator big enough?
When you go to natural gas, you have to increase the size of the KW cut significantly.
Okay?
The machine gets bigger and it gets more costly. The most efficient way to run generators was diesel fuel.
Okay, the most efficient way to run it, and we won't be running it much, though. I mean,
Much, right.
how many hours have you run this generator in the
There's
last
an hour
5
meter
years?
on it. I haven't looked at it.
It's, will you, when you're getting prices for generators, will you get natural gas as well?
We can do that.
I'd like to see it, because every development I've been on where a generator's been installed, they've been natural gas. They might need a 3-inch natural gas line run to it, but that might get away from any DEQ issues with the diesel on the river and having stagnant fuel at the generator.
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, Doctor.
Do you have Light and Power? Is it TC Light and Power here? Have you
Yes.
touched base with them on anything that they might do towards a grant or something like this?
I have not.
All right. At the state home in Grand Rapids, State Home for Veterans, we had to replace a generator, and they got in with Consumers Energy, and they actually paid part of it and then did the study and what you actually need. So you might touch base with them, and they may be able to offer some assistance or some engineering even, I don't know. But
I'll do that.
Anybody else? I have a question. What's the total cost you think for this?
It's going to be between 80 and 90,000,
Okay.
right in that range
And,
somewhere.
David, is that our budget, or we're
It's not budgeted.
it's not budgeted?
But,
Okay.
you know, I think we can find funding for it. I think there's funds in capital improvements.
Yeah, move something around or something.
I think I was asking for maybe a reprioritization of some of the capital funding.
If we need to do that, we'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things where wouldn't it be terrible if something did happen and we had the opportunity?
Yeah, it's not uncommon to have an old generator in these buildings and have to find parts for it, and, you know, you scrounge them up. When I heard, well, you know, we're really having a problem now because the only place we can find is a place in Texas, and there's only one of them, and
And it's
it's
used.
like, okay, now it's time.
And it's a used generator.
Now let's get it going.
Used parts.
Used parts.
I have another question. You said that you were going to need to rent a temporary generator, like one on wheels.
That's correct.
What are the chances, if this generator fails, we have an emergency and it fails, can we get a rental over here right away?
Yeah, they're local.
Do we have connections to make that happen?
Yes.
So that 45-minute time, can we get it there
That
before
might be a little tough. If you're into a storm or trees are
Yeah.
down, stuff like that, that's a little quick.
I'm just shooting the bull, but would it be financially feasible to get a rental now and have it there?
For 2 weeks, it's $2,800.
Oh, I guess not. So,
So it's not
okay.
We're in the wrong business, Dan.
Okay, any other comments? Yes.
I just want to thank Commissioner Kropa for bringing this forward. I did tell her, I do feel a certain sense of responsibility. While I only voted for 2 of these budgets out of all these years, the first one being in 2006 when I didn't know any better, I should have been more inquisitive, and I thank you that you were.
The committee system works. We put a Board of Commissioner rep on commissions and boards for a reason. Mostly I sit there and listen to people like police chiefs and fire chiefs who know exactly what they're doing, and I'm not much help. But when this item came up, I thought, oh, we could, as a Board of Commissioners, step forward and help our emergency services. And if we do it expeditiously and simply, maybe they'll believe in us a little bit and know that we're there to help them when they need it.
I do have a question for Dean. Is any portion of this generator able to be purchased by the 911 surcharge?
Well, the answer would most likely be yes, but
Okay.
I thought you were going to ask a different question, if the city would be responsible for part.
That was going to be my second question.
They would also be responsible for part of the cost.
6.9.
All right, just checking.
Yes to both.
If only the
Just
mayor
about.
had come tonight, we could have, we hadn't pulled them off.
Dan?
Sonny?
I guess the one point that I would like to make, and as we have this discussion, I want to back up a couple months to when I talked about the fact that it was very important for this new board to hold a strategic planning session, reevaluate our goals and our responsibilities, and evaluate our prioritization of all of our improvements, whether it be capital improvements or what. The Capital Improvement Committee has met, and a draft I've read the draft of their findings, and it's been forwarded to the Planning Commission, which sees it next, and then it will come to us. I would assume sometime either the end of this month or the forepart of the next month. The Planning Commission votes on it first, but I think it's important that we, think long and hard about how soon we can get to that strategic planning process and the reevaluation of our priorities.
I agree with Sunny. Is there any way we could start the idea of just a poll, a doodle poll, or at least look at our schedules and talk about meeting for that?
Okay, yes.
Sonny's brought this up previously, and what I stated publicly was my intent was to do it after Mr. Muha came. But absolutely, now would be the perfect time to at least get a doodle poll out there, because obviously Mr. Muha is coming on Friday.
Okay,
So,
does that
yeah.
need to be made into a motion?
No.
Okay. Now, are we going to have a motion on this generator deal, or no?
Don't need to.
Well, no, probably we should, because Danny needs formal action to go off on RFP.
And to spend the money.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to direct facilities to prepare an RFP for a emergency generator to cover the governmental center for on behalf of Grand Traverse County.
And do we have a second?
Support.
Okay, any discussion? Yes.
Does that motion need to include the fact that Commissioner Klaus wants to look at natural gas as well as diesel?
Danny's going to put the
All
RFP
righty.
out, and when he puts it out, he'll put the specifications both ways.
Okey dokey.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. Okay, we're at finance. Number 1, general fund, February 28th, 2015, trial balance.
If I could, the 3 individuals that just walked in, there is another meeting here. I'm not sure if you're in the right meeting. I think there's a
There's a
meeting.
parks meeting
It's like a joint recreational.
over
pact
there.
But you can stay with us
You can
if
stay with the county board meeting if you'd like.
Planning committee, isn't that what it is?
I believe so.
Yeah. Just go
Something-
right out the hall.
We'll miss you.
Okay, if you have, and some of this may seem kind of maybe not out of line, but for the new commissioners, what we generally do on a monthly basis, I try to bring a summary report regarding our general fund, which is the main operating fund of the county. This is only one of about 80 some funds that we have, but it's your most significant fund. If you look at page 40, this is a trial balance as of February 28th. We're not going to go through, or we're not going to spend a lot of time on these individual account balances, but, you know, the totals are supposed to be in balance, which they are. That's a good thing. But we're going to concentrate primarily on the revenues. There's a revenue control and an expenditure control, and that gives you, as of that point in time, how we're tracking. And you can see at the end of February, the revenues were about 1.3 million, 1.4 million less than the expenditures, which is not uncommon because our most significant revenue source, our tax revenue, we don't even levy that until June or July 1st. So it's not uncommon for the first 6 months to run a cash deficit in this fund or to have a situation where the revenues are trailing behind the expenditures. That's why we have a fund balance in this fund of about $9 million. So the next two pages, though, if I can direct you to page, I'm going to go to, I think we had these out of order, but page 41 has a summary of the expenditures by function. And all I'm trying to show here is how we compare with the same point in time in our fiscal year with, you know, the prior year. And I'm noting any significant differences. And sometimes we'll record transactions sooner than we did in the previous year, or we may invoice or bill. There can be differences. And the two main differences here are with the timing of our appropriations, which I recorded the first quarter appropriations in February this year versus March a year ago. That's the transfers out. All within budget, no budget variance. And then the other significant difference is when we made the payment to mental health. The payment was made in February of 2015 versus March a year ago. So just simply timing differences with our expenditures. The next page, 42, summarizes the revenues. And you can see there's, generally what I try to do is explain any of the variances that are $100,000 or more. And you can see that the first one is the state grants. We have a number of things going on here. The revenue in 2015 includes state revenue sharing payments that we're now receiving. To date, we've received $257,000. That was one payment. That's a good thing. We are back online to receive revenue sharing. The judges' salary payments that we receive came in March this year rather than February a year ago. I'm not sure why that happened, but I can't control what the state does or doesn't do. And then in the prior year, I had a difference of opinion with my auditors regarding how we accounted for the convention facility payment. Needless to say, I lost that argument. But that's the other significant difference there. They didn't agree with the treatment or the approach that we took the year before. The local unit contributions are less because we're currently working with the townships on the community policing officer arrangement. That's the main difference there. In the prior year, I had invoiced for those, we invoiced those costs on a quarterly basis. We have not done that this year. This year, we've also invoiced our indirect cost revenues sooner in the year than we did a year ago, so that's simply a timing difference with the other financing sources. And then with the transfers in, that difference is due to the fact that we have fully used our revenue sharing reserve. In the prior year, our allowed transfer was 1.7 million. This year, we only have 563,000 in the fund, which is the final transfer that's made to the general fund. So everything is within budget. Most of these differences are simply timing versus a year ago. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call, stop in, send me an email. Try to be brief on this because the numbers can be rather boring or dull. So that's it, unless there are any questions.
Any questions? Okay.
The next item, I have a few budget adjustments that I'm asking for your approval. On page 44, we learned that we were no longer, well, we had budgeted for the TNT special investigations. We had actually earned all of that revenue in 2014. So this adjustment, I'm reducing the revenue and the expenditures so that we don't overstate our revenue in the general fund. We try to manage the budget and take it down when we know that we're not going to receive revenue. So that's what we're doing there. The second adjustment on the bottom of the page is we're budgeting a portion of the mental health court grant that the district court has. We're not budgeting 100% of the grant because they're not really using all of the available grant. We're anticipating that they'll use about $10,000 this year. Then on page 45, the first adjustment is for the carpeting and the work that was done at the meeting room. We were trying to have that done in 2014, but that took place in January of this year. So we're budgeting the Parks Fund balance to cover that project. And then last month, or in January, the board approved the camera surveillance equipment out of the Capital Improvement Fund, and I'm working with MMRMA hopefully to get a RAP grant to cover part of that. So those are the budget amendments that I'm asking for your approval.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the budget amendments as outlined by the Finance Director.
Moved by Commissioner Wheelock. Do we have
Second.
a second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Crawford. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It carries. Next is invoice for psychiatric services.
We were asked to, and I think it was Greg Paffhouse that actually, I'm not sure what meeting, but we were,
Oh, I can take that.
go ahead.
Yeah, Greg House and Carl Kovacs and Commissioner Rennie and I sat down, I think it was just before Christmas or between Christmas and New Year's. And the board had directed the county to send a bill to the mental health people for $25,000 for jail mental health services. These are mental health services for people that come into the jail that are not mental health clients. But they still, have to receive services because there's something going on there. So we have to hire a psychiatrist to come in and evaluate them and do some things. Anyway, so I said, let's send them a bill. That's our budget item, $25,000 in the general fund. We had a meeting. They said, we can't do that. It's a 6-county arrangement. Everybody would want us to do that. The board's not going to agree to do that for Grand Traverse County and not for everybody else. And we can't, oh, by the way, spend the money on that. So, unless they're clients. So it's kind of a catch-22. And we said, we're going to send you a bill and you can reject it. And that's what we did. And that's what this is about. And it's to bring this matter to a close or to do a next step or whatever. But we needed to bring this forward and say, we sent them an invoice. They sent us a letter saying, no, we can't pay that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Commissioner McFarland?
I'm pretty sure I've asked Captain Hall this before, and I don't remember his response. Veterans have access in many instances to psychiatric care. Do we check when people are arrested and brought into our jail, whether or not they have they're veterans, and maybe in some instances, especially with coming back from Iraq or whatever,
Sure.
PTSD, where we could avail ourselves to some specialized veteran services that might help inmates?
Yeah, I don't know what they do in the jail. I'd have to ask Captain Hall, but...
It seems to me I asked him this a long time ago, but I may have dreamt that.
I know they do what they can, and right now, it's pretty much the $25,000 we're talking about.
Well, I'll make a note to
things
call
that they've looked everywhere to try and get somebody else to cover these expenses, and mental health won't do it.
I'll call him and ask him.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Well, I guess I've probably been a little verbal about this problem for a long time. The enabling agreement that put together what's now called Northern Lakes Community Health and Grand Traverse County participation guarantees Grand Traverse County that Great Lakes Community Mental Health, and as it evolved, will provide mental health services in our jail. Period. That's all it says. They will and are responsible to provide mental health services in our jail. At the time that the Great Lakes Mental Health was formed, we had, I believe, the sheriff can correct me, I believe we had 2 individuals in there 40 hours a week. And now we're down to, we're lucky if we get 20 hours total. You know, and as far as Northern Lakes Community Mental Health discussion about whether those people in the jail are their clients or they are not their clients, we've shown them reports where they have long-standing registered clients in our county jail, and we can't even get them to come and make a mental health evaluation on those people. I did push for this when we had the discussion in the budget. This is a fee, you know, as far as I'm concerned, hands down, community mental health is responsible to provide mental health services in our jail. It's in the enabling agreements that created community mental health, and I don't see any reason Grand Traverse County taxpayers should be paying an additional $25,000 a year out of our general fund budget when we send $682,000 a year to community mental health. They are by far our largest appropriation, but yet they cannot provide mental health services in our jail, which is part of the enabling agreement that created them. They are responsible, hands down, according to the agreement that created community mental health, to provide mental health services in the jail. And they have not fulfilled their responsibility there. And now, in order to meet the need that we have in the jail, we're spending an additional $25,000. And I firmly believe that we should deduct that $25,000 from the appropriation we make to community mental health.
Wow. Thank you, Commissioner Wheelock. Commissioner Crawford.
So in Mr. Kovac's letter here where it says there is no enabling legislation, statute, or regulation, is he incorrect? Or which is it? Is there enabling legislation that allows us to bill community mental health or not?
Requires. It says that requires.
You can bill all you want.
Pretty carefully worded, I think.
Any other comments? Commissioner Klaus.
We're the customer, aren't we? We're the ones that pay community mental health, or not? Or we just?
I don't know that we're...
Well, little history lesson. When you create an authority, a mental health authority, they used to be mental health departments of the county. When we created this authority, a whole bunch of the people that were county employees went to this authority, along with their defined benefit legacy costs went to that authority for all these other the other 5 jurisdictions that really didn't have as nice a retirement system as Grand Traverse County had at the time. They kind of balked at that, and the agreement that came out of that when the authority was created was, and the statute that creates the ability to, the enabling legislation for authorities requires that, you know, once that is set in that year that you create the authority, that's your appropriation forever. No change to that, unless you bust up the whole thing and start something different. So the $682,000 was a reflection at the time of Grand Traverse County's debt that they sent to this authority when they sent all those people over there. And that's why our appropriation is disproportionately large. This is the way it's been explained to me, and it sounds perfectly logical. Can you change it? Are we the customer? It's part of an authority. It's mental health. It's 90% of the money that goes through there is coming from the state, the 10%. Our $682,000 is like 10%. You know, of the 6 counties, that's our portion of the 10% of their budget. But the rest of it's really a state agency that deals with people with developmental disabilities and mental illness and, you know, all those group homes and things like that that mental health provides, including when somebody who's a mental health client gets booked into the jail, they do, their services kick in. But when they get booked into the jail and are having psychotic behavior, correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, but nobody's there with a checkbook for that. We get to pay for that.
Commissioner Crawford.
So are we contracting with community mental health to provide psychiatric services in the jail? Does this Dr. Lynn Conlon work for community mental health specifically? Or, so we're not, so we're just billing community mental health for service, but they're not actually the providers of the service?
No, I think we're paying Dr. Conlon to do those assessments and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Prescribe medication, do all kinds of things for people with mental issues in the jail that are not mental health clients. And
Okay.
that's
So I
just
guess
a
I'm not
bill, that's just a
understanding why we're billing mental health for
contractual
that.
relationship that we have with Dr. Conlon.
Okay.
What the previous board wanted to do was send the bill for Dr. Conlon to mental health saying, mental health should be taking care of these people coming into the jail because they should be your clients, or they will be your clients, or something.
And some of them are their clients. They just choose not to evaluate them in the jail.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Dr. Hogg would be the guy to talk to on this, I think.
Yes, Commissioner Krupa.
Well, first, I'd like to hear our civil counsel's suggestion if there's anything we can do. It sounds like a legal thing. But before that, I just need a quick clarification, listening to so many budgets. What is the allocation that comes from is it the alcohol tax? Isn't that 600?
tax?
Is that what we're talking about here?
No.
No.
No, the general fund makes an appropriation to the Mental Health Authority. It's fixed in amount, so it's coming out of your general fund budget. It's $682,200 annually. It's been fixed since, I think, about 1999. And it provides mental health services for county residents, and it's supposed to provide the mental health services for our jail
For the jail.
inmates.
What is the funds that come from a tax that go through Grand Traverse County but go right back out?
That's the
Substance
convention facility, or sometimes it's referred to as the liquor tax. We give 50% of
okay.
that to a substance abuse coordinating agency, different.
Totally
funds.
different, and
And that
this is all general fund dollars, taxpayer revenue. Okay. I just couldn't remember. But anyways, I would like to hear, do we, we discuss things like governing documents of a formation of an authority, but is there really a legal standing?
Well, I really don't want to give an off-the-cuff answer
So
to
maybe
it. I
we
think
could
we'd
have
have
a
to, we'd have to look into it and come back to the board and tell your options. It is gray area.
You're such a lawyer.
That's a good answer, though.
Sounds like a
No,
finance director to
I
me.
didn't expect an answer, but that would be the only direction we can go is what the law would allow us to, and we only have one person
I mean,
sitting here that's an expert.
what does concern me is that if the county does have a contract with Dr. Conlon, and she's owed money for her services, regardless of who's responsible, is there going to be a breach of that contract for not paying her? That's what concerns me, but, to
I
comment
don't
on.
think we are not paying her.
We
We are
are.
definitely
We're
making
seeking
payments to Dr.
reimbursement,
Conlon more
right.
than we're supposed
All
to.
right.
The only
So-
question is whether or not we should be reimbursed for that expenditure by mental health.
It would be nice to know if it's a dead end or not.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to call on Commissioner Wheelock.
The other piece of this is when Northern Lakes Community Mental Health, and I'm sorry, I can still get this Great Lakes thing in here somewhere, but when they do their annual report to us, they're going to tell you about how many thousands of hours they provide of mental health services in Grand Traverse County and how many people they serve here. But what they forget to mention is the fact is their regional treatment facilities are all here. So every person they see in that treatment facility or in one of their programs here, they assess that person to Grand Traverse County. So that's how they get this thing turned around to where they're providing, millions of hours worth of service every year for the $682,000 in Grand Traverse County. But not all of those residents necessarily reside here or have been here long-term. They may be here for treatment, but now they're Grand Traverse County costs. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the only issue here is the fact that the enabling agreement that created the Mental Health Authority specifically says they will provide mental health services in our jail. And they are not fulfilling that part of the contract.
Dr. Johnson?
And I think if you can look into that also, because that is a breach of contract then, I think that would potentially allow us then to deduct that. If they're in a breach of contract, I mean, you know, I would think that we might be able to deduct that, and that might get them to the table here to pull their head out of some area and to start talking to us. There's mics on again, isn't it?
Good luck with that. I've had a lot of those discussions with Greg Palthouse and his predecessor before him and now his successor after him.
And also then, if we can't do anything contractually, I guess I'd like to know, you know, legislatively, who do we got to start talking to and pursuing, because it does seem like a lot of money, and that was an interesting point there, about if they're using numbers to say, well, we're treating this many people in Grand Traverse County, if they're not actually Grand Traverse County residents, then that greatly will inflate their numbers, so.
Mental health, being able to use their funds for jail.
All right.
Yeah,
There was I think it was 2009.
Yeah, there's been issues with the Attorney General off and on.
Our Attorney General issued an opinion in 2009, I believe, that said you can't use mental health funds for jail.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
That was the Attorney General's opinion. I believe it was 2009, but the fact is that the organizational agreement in which Grand Traverse County agreed to participate with Great Lakes Mental Health specifically states that they will provide health services or mental health services in our jail.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Okay, we don't need any action on this, do we?
No, you don't. I just, we wanted to present to the board to let them know what happened.
Do you have a suggestion about what we should do?
I mean, we can continue the discussion with them about what we can do, and, you know, I don't know how far it's gonna go. I mean, they've really said we can't.
Okay, so our next step would be with our attorney then? Okay, cool. Can we move on then? Okay, let's go to rental of office space in governmental center.
We lease or rent a very small office down in the lower level of this building. It's 241 square feet. It's, I'm not even sure why the EPA wanted to extend or renew this lease, but the current lease expires the end of April. I was contacted in February about renewing the lease, which was a surprise because I had heard that they were, you know, just going to walk away. But it's down, it's basically on the interior of the building. The issue that they raised, though, was that the current rate, which was $16.96 a square foot, was higher than the market rate based on the research that they had done for this area. So I did my own checking. I'm not a realtor, but there's a number of websites that you can go out and, you know, pull up information, and they were right. I countered then with a rate of $15 per square foot, and they tentatively said that they could live with that. I don't have the authority to negotiate that, but so that's why I'm coming back and asking for your approval. You know, we are looking at maybe doing something with that space, so that's a consequence if we lease this space out. But we've leased it out to the EPA now for, I think it's been 9 or 10 years, and that would be my recommendation. I'm not sure if Dave would agree with that, but it does cause a little bit of extra effort for our facilities management staff, but nothing significant, so.
Commissioner Wheelock.
How long was this lease for, Dean?
The
renewal?
It's a 3-year renewal.
Mr. Chairman, in that I believe that we are going to deem better use of the lower level of this facility, I would suggest that we direct staff to send a letter to the EPA advising them to find different office space. For $3,000 a year, $3,615 a year, I believe we're going to better utilize that space ourselves in the very near future. And I'm inclined to think that if we enter into a 3-year lease with these people, it could cause us complications when we go to reuse, if you will, the lower level of this building.
Is that a motion, sir?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, moved by Wheelock, seconded by Crawford. Discussion. Commissioner.
Dean, generally, when you have a lease, there's some type of cancellation clause, is there not?
There probably is, but I don't know that without looking at the
Okay, the other,
document, which is...
all right, well, generally there is. I'm a landlord and I've
There
got,
probably is. It was drafted by the federal government, so it's a
Oh.
rather extensive document.
I see. Well, sound like, anyway. My next question is it possible, I mean, we have other space where they could move, even in this building.
Well, would it also be possible, because we're currently just starting our efforts to look at what we might be able to do with that space, to possibly look at a shorter term, month to month?
Rather than just say no outright, I would prefer to direct the finance director to at least enter into some kind of negotiate. I'm going to not support your motion. I understand where you're going with this, and I support that. But I would be more inclined to at least let him negotiate a shorter-term lease or hear from them what we can work out, rather than just kick them out.
Dean?
I
Right away.
have made no commitment here. The individual that I am working with, I told him that I don't have the authority to make a firm offer. He understands that. I have no preference on this either way.
Okay,
I mean,
well, I don't,
Commissioner Wheelock?
Dean, what is the per square foot rate that we charge the city in this building?
the city owns their space in this building, so we don't,
But we do it on a square footage basis, correct?
It's 26.9% of the square footage. I don't know exactly what the measurements are, but yeah. It's supposed to be on square footage.
And we do this with, with the other buildings, and we charge back square footage space to our different departments, the public services building. And how does this $15 per square foot rate match to those?
this rate is lower than what we're using internally. When we developed the internal rate, the board practice or procedure has been to adjust it annually by a CPI adjustment. Like I said, I'm not a realtor by any means, so I don't know what.
So like dental clinics north that leases space in the health department building, they're paying a rate higher than this $15?
We actually, in that case, we negotiated
A long-term.
a rate that covered the debt service, so that the new health services building has a different rate than we're charging our other internal departments. So Commissioner Wheelock, I don't know what that rate per square foot is. I can let you know. That my laptop died today, so I just have
I
that.
just remember that I'm pretty sure this $15 is significantly less than we've talked about for square footage costs for all of our buildings.
I
So I'm
don't
trying
think
to
it's
figure out how we got it.
significantly less, but it's probably at least $2, maybe $2.50 per square foot less.
And that's 12 to 15% less, so that's significant in my world.
Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of any place where rents ever go down, so, and I guess I was hoping that the movement with the COA into the basement was gonna be quicker than what you're kinda indicating there, so. Of course, I'm not used to the speed of government, so.
glacial.
I'm not either.
Well, since the basement was kind of my baby, that was the first thing I thought about when I read this. I was concerned about the basement. I'd like to get moving on that. So I do support the motion. I do want to make it clear, too, that if we do negotiate something with the EPA, Dean Bott does not get any kind of realtor's compensation negotiation. We're not reclassifying you, Dean. I'm sorry.
I'm
but
absolutely fine with that.
You don't want to add realtor onto your hats. I would like to just see no, as Sonny had indicated in his motion, and really move quickly. I know the Commission on Aging now with the recent situation there. Maybe there might be a little more of a slower movement, but I still think there's a lot of people there that are ready to get going, and whomever takes over as deputy director or director pro tem, or however it works, I'm sure will be part of working with us to get this going. They seem to be excited about it. We do too. This is some change with the EPA, and I would hate to get into some sort of obligation with someone and then boot them out, so.
Commissioner Klaus?
Yeah, on this lease, that's just for like 2 offices probably, isn't it, or 11 by 11 offices?
It's a separate office, it's block wall, but it could be used for a county department, a county employee, so I can't argue.
We provide the heat, provide the electric,
Correct.
bathroom facilities, so it's probably not in the square foot number.
There's no windows. This
There's
is in
no
the-
windows?
There's no
Okay.
windows.
Well,
This
then-
is in the interior of the building.
window washing. Then,
There is some glass in it, but it actually just looks out into the open area.
well, Alyssa didn't want to give you a realtor fee, but I think anything over $18 a square foot you can get, you can have.
Won't happen.
I have a question. Do we have a current agreement with them? When does that run out, their lease?
The current lease would expire on April 30th, so the end of next month.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion
So is that the guy with the
to,
radioactive suit that comes in and out?
we have a motion to, pardon?
I was going to ask David if he had an opinion in regard to this.
Oh, yeah.
We're actually moving forward with the analysis of the space downstairs. Talked to Ray Kendra about it, got a quote from him. I don't know if John's started that or gotten the scope of work from him yet. We're still working on that piece, but it is actually moving. And you're right, we kind of, until we know that, it's really hard to enter into a long-term arrangement. If we don't have the agreement with us tonight, we can look at the termination clause, and if not, we could talk to them about the termination clause, but like you said, for the amount of money we're talking about.
$3,600 a year?
It's
That's
just
not,
some change.
why
Whoever
bother?
works in that office needs an office with a window. I
Yeah,
mean, come
yeah.
on.
It's for their own good, we're
They
saying.
might like
Yeah.
to move
Yeah,
anyway.
maybe not renew the lease and just let them
Right.
live there till they can find a new place to live.
Well, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? You want to change the motion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, take roll call.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Croupa?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
No.
Wheelock?
yes.
Klaus?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Lathrop?
Yes. Okay, motion passes. All right, now we move on to administration. Am I correct? Yep.
Okay, this is the, you asked me to bring this request back. As you recall, I came to Ways and Means last month and asked for a management and budget analyst and an office specialist, and you asked me to come back and really get what I probably needed, and after consideration, I agree with you. I think that I do need a deputy administrator, somebody who can actually, give some, sustainability to the office and to be able to assign departments to and take major pieces of workload and move over, because with the dams and all the projects that we're involved in, it's getting a little gamey, dicey in my office. The deputy administrator would have basically as much responsibility as I would have in certain areas. I would assign specific departments to that individual, and I would be able to, have a second set of hands. Dean, I'm finding, is pretty much, bogged down with finance issues. He's got his own staff, but, he's got a thin staff as well. Jen has helped me as much as she could, and her staff helps as much as she can, but there are certain things that just can't be delegated. And we have my administrative person, Sarah, is now doing mostly RFPs, contracts, and website things. And so she's really doesn't have the time to do the perfunctory duties that need to be done for the county central services. The office specialist would be charged to central services, a half-time position. It would basically do mostly mail in the morning and in the afternoon, basically receive and send out, plus do some clerical work for the office. That's pretty much all that position would do. And then you asked me also to bring in the board's administrative secretary position, which handles a lot of office manager responsibilities. Pretty much it handles all the responsibilities of an office manager with the exception of direct supervision of staff. And so I asked Jen to run the point factors on the position. She's recommending a grade G, which is basically a step below the office manager, or a grade below the office manager, which makes sense because of the absence of supervisory responsibilities. I think that she should get extra points for having to deal with myself and the Board of Commissioners, but that's just my opinion. So this is a costly position, reorganization. It's $55,900 a year. We don't need any funds for 2015, however, because we've already saved enough money to pay for it with the vacancies that we've had. The board secretary, we can even pick up the additional cost of the administrative assistant position for the Board of Commissioners office. So Chris Kramer is charged to the Board of Commissioners office.
Yeah.
So it's won't require any new dollars for this year, but it will require $55,000 in new dollars for next year. So that's something to think about.
Okay, questions?
What is I have to use the names, I apologize, but Chris Kramer's job under current staff?
Yes,
What is
administrative
she?
secretary.
She's administrative secretary, grade F. Sarah is an office manager?
No, she's not on this anymore.
She's not,
We've
that's
already
an
done
empty
that.
position, the office
She's the,
manager.
she was a secretary, and now she is called the Central Services Coordinator. And she is in the Central Services Fund, which is charged to a
Right.
completely separate fund. And we're proposing that the office specialist would also be charged to that fund, not charged to the general fund. It
So the
would be
current
reimbursed by
staff
all.
is empty under office manager.
The office manager will be eliminated.
Okay.
And that
And
position's
so-
been open since what, last June?
Yep.
An administrative secretary, grade F, is Chris Kramer. And under reorganization, it would be administrative assistant, grade G?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the board's position.
Commissioner?
I'm going to do this in a different way because there's a part of this recommendation I don't support. So I'm going to make a motion that we authorize the administrator to create or add the position of office specialist, grade C, and change the administrative secretary, grade F, to administrative assistant, grade G.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second it.
Okay, discussion.
At this time, I do not support a deputy administrator, and I'd like to explain why. You know, Dave and I actually had this discussion a while back, and I asked him, and I'm a big believer in priority-based budgeting and the process, and where you set your priorities. And I asked him a question. I said, which would you rather have, a planning director or a deputy administrator? And he said, well, John Syke isn't interested. And I said, that's not the question. I don't believe that now is the time to look at a deputy administrator. I think, from my perspective, it's much more important to get somebody in to the finance department to do activity-based accounting. That's my priority. We in this county do not know what a darn thing costs. Look at what we went through when we were looking at deputies. And, you know, I would defy anyone in this room to tell me exactly what the cost is of the swimming pool. You don't know. I really do believe that we have to prioritize, and I don't believe that now is the time for a deputy administrator. I think the process in my mind is to listen to Mr. Muha come and describe priority-based budgeting to us. We can then decide as a board whether or not we want to proceed, and if we want to proceed, we have got to look at activity-based accounting. Because that in part is how you prioritize. You know, you do this every day in your life. You walk into a grocery store and you decide whether you want the organic Emerald soup at $4 a can or whether you want the Value Time at 89 cents a can. It's both chicken noodle, but at least you know what you're paying. We don't know what anything costs here. So for that reason, I do not at this time support a deputy administrator.
Okay, any other comments? I have a question. I want to make sure, and I hate to use names, but I'm not understanding these positions. We're changing Chris Kramer from one spot to another?
Yeah, her title would change from administrative secretary to administrative assistant.
And would that mean a good raise for her?
It would mean it's a one grade increase. It's a raise. It's a good raise. It's about the equivalent of the raise that Sally got, I believe.
Okay, I want to see that happen, yeah.
Okay.
And I also, I guess I can speak, there's others, go ahead.
Dave, is it possible that one of the things that you could assign to a deputy administrator would be some financial analysis? Would that be something that person will be qualified to do?
Yeah, I mean,
Special
one of the
projects
problems we have is...
with the finance department.
One of the problems we have is that Dean has, got a million things on his plate as well. We're all working lots of hours, and when you have, questions come up, research that needs to be done to find out what this costs or that costs, somebody's got to do that work. And sometimes it takes hours and hours of work. We don't have anybody to do that. We have no one to delegate to. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. There's just no one to delegate it to, so I end up doing a lot of that myself. You wanted a 5-year budget projection? I did all that work. It took me probably about 60 hours. In addition to all the meetings, in addition to all the other things that I answered on all those questions, it took me about 60 hours to put that together.
I remember you did it on your vacation when you're going home. You did it extra hours. I remember that. It was a lot of work.
I mean, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's just those kind of things. If you want to do those kind of things, if you want that level of service, you got to have somebody to do that kind of work.
But somebody to do that kind of work doesn't necessarily need to be part of the finance department. A deputy administrator would be qualified to do that kind of work.
Right. I mean, one of the things I want to do is I want to produce a budget document that has a lot of different information in it, the graphs, the charts. I want to constantly incorporate the 5-year projection into the process.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I want to do with this position that can't be done without it. Just can't be done. So, it depends on what you want. If you want what you've been getting, we'll continue to give you the best service we can give you.
Senator Wheelock.
Not so much. I've contended for a long time that we needed a deputy administrator. We just simply have too much on David's plate. We're asking him to prepare budgets not only on an annual basis, but a 3-year, 5-year projections. You've got 13 labor contracts that you renew every year that you want him to take care of negotiating. You have the budget, you have the day-to-day operations, you have the oversight of 550 employees. It's just too much on one guy's plate. And, when I came here a long time ago, we had not only an office manager, but we had a deputy administrator. Those positions have both went away. And the work is still here, folks, and it's gotten more complicated. The the number of phone calls that he has to deal with from, not only the community, but each of us commissioners that call and ask him, I'm sure I waste a sizable piece of his time too, but in order for me to have information to make a decision, I need that information. And sometimes, I can read the packet and I can ascertain the information that I think I need, but sometimes there's something else I want to know. And I don't have anyone else to call but to call David and ask him. And, I believe that with a good administrative or deputy administrator, we can have someone that we can assign to deal with those budget questions and helping put together the budget. We can have someone that can take care of meeting with the implementation team for the Boardman River dams. We can have someone that can make grant applications, can meet with the tribe on a regular basis. All of this stuff takes time, and David just simply doesn't have the time to manage his day-to-day business and be able to do those other things that we would like to have done. I'm willing to support the motion for these two changes, but then I will immediately make the motion to direct staff to prepare a job description and advertise for a deputy administrator.
Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of gave you that task a few meetings ago to look at a deputy director, if you will. And I kind of agree too that I think it's needed. I mean, the big thing is everything we look at now is dollars. We're looking at potentially, we're not sure yet what the dams are going to bring, the Cass Road Bridge, if we proceed with that, all that good stuff. But I think as we ask more and more of Mr. Benda, and we are, I think pretty sure this board is going to ask a lot of questions and ask a lot of information, and that does take time away from everything else he has to do. And I think that position would also help with the results-based, because I think it would give someone else that can look at it and devote some time to it. So I think I agree with the motion you made, but I also agree that I think we need to look at adding that position.
Commissioner Crawford?
I do think, as Bob said, if you're looking at results-based budgeting, this goes with that. This would be a good result. It will give us better information. It will give us quicker information. The glacial speed, hopefully will, hopefully we'll get things quicker. We can make better decisions, quicker decisions, more informed decisions. And I think in the spirit of results-based budgeting, this will give us the result that we want, definitely.
Commissioner Krupa?
I think it's too soon to say that, because we haven't
I'm
had...
hopeful.
Yeah. I was the one that sort of led the discussion in you coming back. And in the spirit of being consistent, which I like to do, I'm going to have the same logic applied to this as the other departments. We acknowledge that we have a budget problem, that there was a lot of positions cut, that we have a giant albatross with the debt. So we have acknowledged that by giving the support staff the raises and reclassification that they need to carry us through while we continue to look at how we can structure this government better. We could give Dave 10 deputy administrators, but I will submit to you it doesn't help, because this government is structured improperly. The amount of direct reports, Sonny himself said, all the things he does, 13 bargaining units, 550 staff, dozens of direct reports. Our departments are not utilizing their hierarchy appropriately. There should not be so many direct reports going to Dave. He should not have as many phone calls from citizens. There should be the appropriate steps so that our administrator only deals with the situations that he should. Now, perhaps a deputy administrator is the way to solve that. You and I have had this discussion for over a year. It's the structure of the government. Until we listen to the budgeting for outcomes proposal, I don't want to create a new position. I'm all for upgrading Chris, and we upgraded Sarah, and I do support Commissioner Max Bauer's part-time office clerk, because that would help take some of it off of it. But if we approve a brand new position, I still think we're thinking in a vacuum. He has too much work. You can divide it amongst two guys, and you know what? They're both going to be buried. Because we have too many union bargaining contracts. We have too many direct reports. Until we target that, I'm not going to support anything that's going to bring in, it's a skilled worker. This is somebody skilled. And we're not going to bring them in and get rid of them 6 months later, or change their job, or change their pay. When I asked you for that, I meant it. But I meant it in a timely manner with the budgeting, which is Friday. I mean, we're 2 days off, it's not. But to see if that's going to lead us to an idea, I'm no expert on government structures, but I don't think it takes an expert to see that we got a problem here. I mean, it's top-heavy. It doesn't work. We need to look at combining departments. We need to look at streamlining our processes and providing a better product for the citizens and a better environment for the staff. This is not going to do it. I don't think. Maybe it will, but let's wait till we hear from the expert. I'm prepared to support the support staff that is needed to help right now, but not for an executive position like a deputy administrator. I don't think we're there yet. But I invite this to come back very soon after we have our discussion with Mr. Muha.
Any other comments? Okay, I'd like to make one. I do think you need help, Dave. I know you're overworked. But I do feel I want to wait until I hear Mr. Muha before I make that decision. That's only 2 days away. So I will support this motion, and I won't support a motion right now for deputy administrator. It doesn't mean I don't believe Dave needs help. I do think so. But I want to hear this guy talk on Friday, and then I'll know more. I can make a better decision. So that's the way I feel about it. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to direct the administrator to prepare and distribute an application for a deputy administrator for Grand Traverse County.
Is there a second to that? Motion doesn't carry. Okay. Then we have, let's see, we go to unfinished business. Am I right? That's going to be community policing officer. Am I on track, everybody? Okay. Let's go with that.
Okay, I prepared an agreement. I think I don't need to go over the history of this. Had a meeting with townships. It didn't result in any resolution. They went to their township boards with a proposal other than the one that I proposed. At the meeting, I did propose a possible compromise. Didn't hear back from them on that. That's where we stand. I don't know what you want me to do with this. I'm confused. To me, the two issues are, what do we use as the cost per officer? Whether it's an average cost, and I believe Chuck Corn would like to see 3-year officers using some hybrid health insurance cost. The townships have adopted something that said limit our costs to inflation or, somebody else talking? I'm sorry, did I have the floor?
No, you got it.
Okay, thanks. I think they asked for, I think there's attachments in the back of your, I don't know if you were distributed these interlocal agreements from townships?
They came in a separate email.
Yeah.
From Chris, yeah.
And they say basically, I think it's paragraph 10, says that they would like to limit their expense to inflation or 5%, whichever's less. And my proposal says use the average cost per officer. It's right now it's budgeted at 5% for 2015. In my meeting, I suggested that we could come up with a smaller number for that, but in the long run, we would like to come up with something that we could look at the law enforcement budget in the budget process, adopt that budget, and say, okay, the average cost is, we'll take the bottom line of that, divide it by the number of officers and they're dedicated to law enforcement, and charge that number. And if, deputies don't settle their contracts after the end of the, by the end of the year, and it ends up costing more, we're not going to change that number. Everybody's going to know what the number is at the end of the year. That was the proposal. I think that's a fair and reasonable proposal, but if whatever the board wants to do is fine with me.
Okay, I am going to say this, we'll take comments from the board, but I am going to invite you guys up to have your say. Turns out I have the power to do that, so I'm going to do it. And board first, though. Yes.
Well, I have 3 issues in the contract when going over it that I wanted to discuss with Dave. Or just general statements. I know you were looking for input, but there might be some questions. You did answer one of my questions today, and I'll bring that up. My first issue is just the base cost. I wanted to understand why we had a different base cost than all of the township ones. And that was why I had requested to have the townships submit their contracts, because I wanted all of us to see. It's hard to know what you're talking about when you only see one side. So in talking to the townships to find out why their number is different than ours, the difference is the cost of health care for the officers. Our number is based on a full family, and their number is based on a single. So that's the difference, which is like $2,300 or whatever it is. So this base number is important because that's the number we're going to work on every year. I think all of us agree on several things, and that is, one, to have limited amount of contracts. We have too many floating out there. And the second one would be to stop having this discussion every year. So the first thing was how we came to the price per officer and why the county chose to use full family health care versus single.
We didn't.
But if you subtract out the numbers, that's it.
The average cost per officer was used. So the average cost of health insurance for all the officers was used.
Okay?
What you're referring to is the 3-year officer proposal that was requested by the townships.
Okay.
We put in a 3-year officer, we put a full family coverage cost, and then there was a dispute over, whether we should use that on that. And my point is, we wouldn't use the 3-year officer idea at all. It doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is the average cost per officer, because they have average officers. They don't have first-year officers, they don't have third-year officers, they don't have least senior officers, although if we gave them all least senior officers, it'd be about a third-year officer. So, average was what we wanted to use. We think that is in the county's best interest, because if the price goes up more than inflation or it drops, we know what the number is. When we put the budget together for, all those officers, and we put the law enforcement budget together, that's what it is. We're going to take that number, divide it by the number of officers, and that's the number.
Where does the 5% come into play in the dollar amount of $79,816?
That was just a number that we used in the budget process. I mean, the idea is, what we've been striving to do is to get back up to direct costs.
So the $79,816 is 5% above the actual average cost of an officer?
No, it's 5% above what was charged in the previous year.
What was charged in the previous year?
Right.
Okay.
And I don't know what they were charging. In previous years, my previous memo way back when that I sent to the townships tried to cover that, but, we had the legacy costs were in there. Dean and the Sheriff's Department were dealing directly with the townships on this. I think the Sheriff's Department was dealing directly with townships. They came up with numbers. They looked at that legacy cost, said that doesn't make any sense. So they came up with other ways of doing it, and just ended up becoming a percentage increase every year. They didn't link it to anything. So what I'm trying to do is get this thing to a place where we all agree what's going to happen next year, so we don't have to fight about what happens next year, and we agree on the basis for it. And whatever that is, good.
My problem with this particular section on payment for services isn't necessarily the base cost. It is the following sentence. For subsequent years, the payment shall be based upon the average of direct personnel costs of patrol division personnel in the sheriff department as adopted in the annual budget by the Board of Commissioners.
Right.
Well, we could adopt anything. We could take the cost, average cost of an officer and say, we're going to up it 25% and adopt it in the budget. It's,
No, that's
it
not.
leaves a lot up to interpretation to me in that sentence, as
The
adopted
intent-
in the budget by the Board of Commissioners.
Well, however you word it, to get to the correct intent. The correct intent is, we want to be able to say, okay, for this year, we put in a 1.5% increase for wages, although it may turn out to be 3, because they may, we haven't settled with them. We put in so much of a cost for health insurance for single two-person and family. We put in, whatever else that we do with benefits. Those benefits, the life insurance, the disability insurance, whatever those costs turn out to be, for all employees in the county. We don't segregate just the deputies and go, oh, well, we're just going to charge a whole bunch more for them this year. We basically do our personnel cost projections for the whole county. We put it into those budgets, we adopt them, and that becomes the number for that year. And what we're saying is we're not going to change it later, as we, if we were to, get new information or settle on a contract, for example, in March or April. We're in mediation next week with the deputies. And we settle on something different than what we have in the budget. In fact, we already have proposed something different than what we have in the budget that will cost the county more money. But we're not proposing to include that, and we wouldn't propose to include it in the future if that were to happen. So that's the idea, is take just the average cost per officer that is established in the budget. And it's established with all the personnel costs in the budget, not like we take them separately and come up with whatever number we want.
But it doesn't protect against that. I mean, when
You know,
you're
we
not
can
in
write
that
the
seat and
language
we're
so
not
that it
in the
does.
seat, it leaves this is supposed to be a contract that we hope will stand for a long time, and I think it leaves a lot open. If you look at the history of these contracts, I mean, they're random. They're from different years and in different terms. One of them from the 90s in Garfield says the amount as determined by the sheriff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we all know Tom would charge about $250,000 apiece for each of the deputies to the townships if we left the, that is a term, and it's true. It's true. It's funny because it's true.
He's just sitting there.
Well, this idea of not having a contract, so they have to come back every year. I don't like that, because I get to see these guys, and I don't get to see them very often all at once. I want them to come back every year.
It's important right
Yeah.
now to have these terms solidified, to remember that at one point, none of us will be in this room, and I hope 20
No,
years
Sonny
from
will
now
still
or
be here.
so, this is still, Sonny will still be here
He'll still be
40
here.
years from now.
Commissioner, go
But other
ahead.
than that, I have one last. My third point is the average cost is using all of these officers, regardless of rank, other than the sheriff and the undersheriff. And that's an important thing to note. When you look at the number for the average officers, and Dave clarified this for me today, it's the number of 53. But we all hear over and over, we have 24 sheriff's deputies. We have, is it 20 in this, 19, because one is a detective. Other than Garfield, these guys all have deputies. Garfield has a detective and a bar chef. I don't know, whatever a bar chef is. So that's important to know. So I guess my point is I've spent a lot of time reading these contracts, and they're important because it's important that we don't make an error and we move forward consistently and make a contract that stands. But I think it's all kind of ridiculous. I really do, because I'm going to just say it. I'm going to say it one last time, and everybody's sick of it. We're getting a contribution from the townships to help supplement our sheriff's department. That's my belief in this. So I would like to see a really simple formula. I know Dave absolutely despises it when I say this, but it is really, truly how I feel.
despise it, I just disagree with
A
it.
simple formula, a simple formula. I wasn't opposed to the CPI. I like it because year to year, it takes into account variances in the environment and what's going on in our economy. And the CPI, neither here nor there. It may be a great standard, it might not be. And that's a discussion to have, I suppose, for more detail. But I would like to see a simple formula with some sort of measure, not just what the Board of Commissioners passes in a budget, but something like a CPI. And I'd like to see us get this done and get it billed, because clearly we're missing about $361,000 from our revenue this quarter. I don't understand why we're arguing about things like healthcare and third-year officers and all of that. I still view it as a supplement, and we're fortunate to have it. And if they pull it, we are going to have to say goodbye to dozens of our sheriff's deputies, because we can't fund it. They supplement us to the tune of well over $1 million. We all know how many deputies that funds. I'm not willing to say goodbye to the deputies in our sheriff's department and watch the townships go to their local authorities. I found out from Chief Weber, Rural Fire Authority is now seeking out to become part 93 something government, so that they're able to do community policing officers as well. Metro Fire Authority already has that ability. This is our sheriff's department. There's a weight on our shoulders to that. I truly believe to keep the sheriff's department intact, and we need to acknowledge that the townships are supplementing our ability to do that and come up with a simple formula.
Okay, Commissioner Crawford and Commissioner Johnson.
I think for where it says, for subsequent years, the payment shall be based upon the average of the direct, as approved, as adopted in the annual budget. It is ambiguous. I think right there needs to be this,
That
the
sentence is a
appendix
problem.
part where you have the exact formula that the county would go through to figure that number out. It needs to be spelled out. It needs to be very, very clear as to what average are you using? Are you using average of all the officers? Are you using, which exact number are you using to get to this bottom number? It needs to be part of the contract. Absolutely. I also heard at one of the townships that the term probably ought to be revisited at a specific time. Not every year, absolutely not every year. But in 5 years, in 3 years, something should be revisited, rather than have it be completely indefinite. That was a suggestion that I had at one of the townships that I said I would bring here.
Dr. Johnson's next.
Well, yeah, I mean, to tag along with Commissioner Krupp is saying that, you know, I just quickly calculated for 19 officers, that's about $43,833 additional we'll have to put into the budget. But we're getting 19 officers for what it would cost less than one officer. I mean, you know, we've had discussions about what is the right amount of officers. I mean, I'm sure you could shed some light on it. There is no real good study to say how many officers there should be in a given geographical area. Studies on, you know, when you have a population that inflates so greatly. The other side of this, and I don't know if, you know, I was thinking of this today, was I don't know what revenue these officers bring in also in the form of tickets. You know, living in Kingsley, I see them all the time in that 35-mile-an-hour zone. So I know they're writing tickets. Today I saw them, and you think, well, they're bringing in some revenue also.
Yeah, it's roughly 20,000 an officer.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, you said it correctly. If everyone decided to pull out, which I don't think, even with the 5%, I think it would just change some of the numbers, obviously. But I think even if they did that, we could not afford to provide the amount of service that we have in this county. And I think this county does deserve the service that they get, and it's good service. It's the only way we would get the amount of officers that we have on the street right now.
Commissioner Max Bowen.
Well, I never let an opportunity go by that I don't talk about priority-based budgeting between now and Friday. This is my last chance. Although there is a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 regarding FOIA, and if I can squeeze it in there, I will. First of all, I want to comment on something Commissioner Kropa said. She said whatever a bar chef is. I would like everyone to know that we're not she's not talking about a bar chef.
No.
Bar chef is the name of an officer. So I just wanted to.
He's fantastic.
Because,
but
yes,
I don't know how to
but when I
describe
heard that, I'm going, I wonder if people understand
Chris.
that you're not talking about
Chris
a bar chef. Anyway, but we're sitting here arguing once again about what numbers we use. Hence the need for an activity-based cost accountant in finance, in my opinion, because we really don't know the actual cost. Now, I want to express a concern about the negotiation process back and forth. I understand that there's discrepancies or differences of opinion regarding the health care costs. And what brings this to mind is I've been listening to other units of government as to what their health care cost increases were. And they were much less than Grand Traverse County's. I was talking to Corey Hansen, who, as most of you know, is the director of the pavilions, and he was surprised that we provide family health care. He said they, at the pavilions, offer what Grand Traverse County commissioners are offered. Single health care, and anything above and beyond that, you pay yourself. Now, let us assume that down the road, as contracts expire and they are negotiated, that we change the health care costs. You know, I don't know how this factors into the negotiation process. And that's just a question I have. If for some reason the health care cost goes down, I mean, it works both ways. I don't know how to say it any other way other than, and I'll just be quiet now.
Any other comments? Yes.
I think if it is truly based on the direct cost, however that is negotiated, however that formula comes out, I do think that if they're paying the direct costs, and then it shouldn't go up by a percentage every year. It shouldn't be a set percentage, or even with cost of living or anything. It really should be, the formula should be followed every year,
Right.
and that's the number. Because then the county isn't saddled with the risk of if healthcare goes up, but we also share the wealth if some of the costs go down. So I think that really is the most
Thank you.
equitable way to do it, is to have a very specific formula that's agreed upon, and that formula is used every single year when the bill is sent.
You said it better than me.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Well, I think the point is, and what we're forgetting about when we talk about this percentage, is the fact that as defined in this document, what the average actual cost is, or direct cost is not what's currently being paid. So the
Right.
discussion was that what they are paying right now would be increased by 5% until they got to the direct actual costs.
That was the idea.
That was the idea and the whole concept when we talked about the 5% during the budget process in the later half of 2014, was we were going to raise the CPO charge by 5% this year, knowing that we were still well underneath what the actual direct cost for an officer was. You know, and I think the idea that when we talk about the percentage, it's this percentage is going to be added each year until we get to that actual direct cost.
That's the way the contract's written. You're absolutely correct. It leaves the door open to add, we could add 35%
But
one year if we wanted.
But I think
If
this
we
would
passed
get
it in
us,
the
this
budget.
number gets us the
The
direct
problem
cost
is,
this year.
somewhere, no, it doesn't. Yeah, but they're not going to, whatever.
I want to have, I'm not bossy, but I want to have this controlled, so
Okay.
who's next? David, go ahead.
Okay, let me try and explain how this works. When we go to put the budget together for law enforcement, all the people that are in there are in there. You know, they're the people who are related to the law enforcement function. We account for them separately. We don't account for township officers separately. Okay, they're all part of one law enforcement function. And what, you know, the captain makes, he's got a schedule. For this year, if the board gave a 1.5% raise to the command officers, which they did, he knows what his salary is going to be because he's got so many years of service. He's, you know, you can go right there. That's what Sally puts together on the page, and she calculates 7.65% of that for, you know, FICA, and she takes the workers' comp rate, and she takes the disability rate, and she takes the, you know, whatever else, and she takes the health insurance that Chris Barshiff has, and she says, okay, he's got a family, so he's, you know, the rate is this for 2015 for him, and those are the numbers that are plugged into that budget. That's the number we're talking about. We're talking about that number. It's not something that we're going to change by percentages or do something weird with. You're going to do the same formula for every departmental budget, including the law enforcement budget. We're going to adopt that with the budget. Those are our assumptions for what our costs are going to be for the upcoming year, and they're our best projections. And that's the number we're going to use. At some point, you got to say, this is what we're going to charge you for next year. And that's what we're proposing, is that once the budget is set for 2000, whatever, the next year, that's when we know the number that we're going to be charging for the next year. Now, what we also talked about was limiting that to a percentage until it hits the number that is the average cost. But not to go over that, not to go over average cost. Just, the 5%, it's like, well, if you want to charge them 3%, that's fine. 3% this year and 3% next year, and then if 3% is too much for the following year, then we do 2.5 or whatever it takes to get the average cost per officer. That's the idea. And it's not, it's really, what we're trying to make it is simple for us so that we can just look at that budget and take the personnel costs and divide it up and say that's the number for the upcoming year. And it's not something that we've, cooked. It's something that is applied to every position in the county.
Thank you, Dave. Commissioner Crawford.
So this number, 79816, is that this says average law enforcement officer costs $79,816. Is that, you're saying that is the average cost per officer? And that is the number that you would like to charge the townships for next year?
The average cost per officer is $81,107.
Oh, okay.
All right, if you take out legacy costs.
Okay.
And the average cost, the 5% over last year is $79,816. You can, like I said, 5% wasn't a magic number. It was the number that we thought, we put into the budget and the board approved.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that we have to charge that. It could be changed. But what we're trying to do in this contract is get something set up that eventually gets us to the $81,107 at whatever pace you want to go to get there. Okay? That's the point. And we will still assume all the costs on the second page, including the ones that aren't even mentioned, which are the ones that are being negotiated right now with the deputies and aren't included in the 2015 budget.
Okay, Sonny would be next.
One of the things that you have to remember about, and it's always tough to figure out what these true costs are, 2 years ago, we looked at a 21% increase in healthcare costs.
Yeah.
Last year, it was 17%.
Right.
This year, by making the changes to the contracts. And remember that any of those changes that you make to that have to be negotiated through the collective bargaining units. We can't just say, okay, we're going to control our healthcare costs by saying, okay, you're not going to be eligible for health insurance on your family. That has to be negotiated through the labor contracts. Earlier, Lisa made some comment about 13 separate bargaining units. I've been trying to get rid of 13 separate bargaining units for 18 years I've been sitting here.
It's so
and we're not going to get there. There is no legal way by which we can get rid of those bargaining units.
No, we wouldn't want
It's
to.
just that simple. We can't get rid of them. They're here. Unless they, Bob left. Bob and I have had this discussion several times over the years, but
That's such a surprise.
but the fact is, we are closer to a unified contract today than we've been in the 16 years I've been sitting here. We are truly closer. We've got the wording better. We are at a point where the contracts that we negotiated in 2014 gave everyone the exact same percentage of wages. We've gotten almost the holidays and vacation time and personal days to align with each other. We are closer than we've ever been. But the fact is, we will never get rid of 13 bargaining units. There's no legal way by which we can do that, unless they were to choose to do that. But we have to remember that it's real easy to say, okay, the actual cost of an officer today is $81,000. But if the healthcare cost goes up 17% next year, and we agree that we're going to charge 3% more to the townships, that 17% eats up that 3% really, really fast. And we're back to where we've been where we're at right now, where we're backwards. We were almost there at one point, but it's probably been 10 years ago. And we've always made this discussion about 3-year officers. Well, that 3-year officer that you wanted as a community police officer, next year he's a 4-year officer. And the year after that, he's a 5-year officer. And pretty soon, in the length of the contracts from back in the late 90s and middle 90s that were written, those guys have got 15, 20 years on now. They get paid a lot more money than they got paid when they were 3-year officers. Their benefit package is higher. Their vacation packages are higher. Their personal days are higher. So, you know, you can't just say, okay, the 81,107 is the number, we're going to get to there. I absolutely agree, the contract has to be written in the fact that it will be the average cost per officer.
Commissioner Crawford.
But you also have to agree that 81,107 is a moving target. Because it's not, the 81,107 is the number this year.
Right.
It's a moving target. So we're headed for something that keeps getting higher. So even at, I mean, what percentage would even, I mean, I don't even, how would you ever even start to figure out what percentage every year would, and how many years it would take to even get there?
Numbers are going to change.
The numbers change every year.
Yes.
One other thing I wanted to ask the sheriff. How much time do the officers, the township officers, spend enforcing local ordinances?
I can't tell you. I don't know if you would be able to get that possibility now. Can't tell you right offhand.
Okay.
So what would be your point, though? Just
Well, I don't think the sheriff enforces township ordinances with his officers, with county officers.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, you do?
They're all the same.
Very little? Okay. That's what I just wanted to know.
Okay, anything else? Yes.
So you said the 79 we're at right now, and we could charge 5% a year till we get to the average cost, and the average cost is 81,1. Is that what you said?
Well, I didn't say that. I just said that,
Or we could
right
charge
now.
something, say
right now,
3% or whatever.
What I proposed was the 79,816 was what we had put in the budget. Charge that for this year, and then go to average cost in future years. But then when we had our meeting, they wanted to try and limit their exposure a little bit. I thought doing a CPI was not a very smart idea from the county's perspective, because we all know that medical inflation alone is 8%, and why would we use the consumer price index to limit their exposure and thereby increase ours? So, what I said was, well, we could knock this down to 3%. Instead of being 79, it would be a smaller number, somewhere in between 76 and 79. And then it would go up by a limit of 3% a year until it reached the 81,107, or the average cost per officer.
Wouldn't it always be going up, though? Because right now, 81,107 is our target as average cost, but 5 years from now, it's just the way that this is worded that's difficult. Again, I didn't say I agreed with CPI, but I said it was more of a standard. It was a more of a standard. I think ultimately we have to decide what is important to us. Is public safety important to us, number of officers, and how important to us is our relationship with the village and the townships in providing, if we do say that public safety is important to us. And if it is, I'm really kind of tired of arguing about third-year costs and family health care and all of this. It seems really kind of simple to me. We may never hit average cost, but you know what? It's still better than nothing.
Commissioner Crawford.
I think Commissioner Johnson alluded to this last week. We actually, the 7 of us, have a conflict of interest.
That's true.
Honestly, because we do represent the county at this level, but we also represent the people in our townships and our district. And we're on both sides of the contract. We represent the constituents that are being patrolled by all these officers and be protected by them. I mean, our township officer in Acme goes, I see him all over. you know, and I don't want to lose that protection. I don't want my neighborhoods to lose that protection. So while we're here discussing this side of the contract, you're also on the other side of the contract. So I think Elisa's correct. We don't want to lose these officers. We don't want to expose the county to a whole lot of extra expense either. But it's hard. It's hard to negotiate both sides of this. We really are on both sides of the same contract.
You're correct that you do represent all those same citizens. You represent the citizens, though. You don't represent the governments.
Right.
Those other governments have their own representatives, and they're sitting in the audience.
Right.
Okay, so you are here to represent the interests of county government for your citizens.
Right.
Okay, so that's the difference, the nuanced difference between what you said and what I just said. And it's a big difference because you're already contributing, well, it's going to be $38,066 a year toward each officer in these townships, and they are township officers fulfilling a township function. And you would be assuming more of that. And the deal that you've had with these townships all these years is that they would pay the direct costs and you'd pay all these other costs, this $38,000 worth of vehicles and commodities and contractual services and indirect costs and administrative costs and machinery and equipment and everything else. You're going to pay that. You've already decided that that was the deal. It's really hard to negotiate this if that's not the deal anymore. And what you're suggesting and what they're suggesting is, we want you to pick up some of the direct costs too. That's what they're asking. And they want to change the deal so that you pick up more of the money. And that's, if you're the Board of Commissioners. They got rid of the Board of Supervisors for this very problem. Okay, the Board of Supervisors, the Township Supervisors used to be the Board of Commissioners. And the reason that the county governments were changed into, you know, just single-member districts and not represented by Township Supervisors, one of the main reasons was that very conflict. So, you know, whatever you want to do is fine with me, but I'm just telling you, you know, you're already contributing a lot of money toward their officers. You've got 24 county officers, and that's a pretty good number of county officers for a county this size. All those other ones, those guys wanted. They asked for them, and they wanted to pay for them, and the deal was, you pay the indirect, and we'll pay the direct. So, I've said my piece. I'm done.
Okay. Commissioner Wheelock.
I think it's important to note that from the very beginning, with the COPS grants and then the evolution thereafter, that the townships were set to pay direct costs, and the county had agreed to pay indirect costs. That's the discussion that we've had. You know, we get into the discussion about the conflict we have because we represent the townships. Well, we represent the citizens of the community, not necessarily the townships
That's what I
per
meant.
se.
That's what I meant.
But this is exactly the reason that we should not be involved in this discussion about the negotiations. That's David's job. And I firmly believe that it should be his responsibility to negotiate this contract, and the commissioners should not be involved in that negotiation.
Anybody else? Commissioner Klaus.
Like Sonny said, we've got Dave to negotiate the contract that's written. It's what we have. Let him negotiate it, unless we're looking to rewrite the contract. And myself, I'm representing Grant Township, Mayfield Township, Blair and Green Lake, part of Blair Townships. I've got one community officer there. So I'm sure that my districts would say, let the townships pay for their officers per the contract.
Okay. Commissioner, Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember that there was no negotiation before. It was just, this is how it was going to be, and now at least there is a starting point. I mean, I agree, we should let Mr. Benda handle it now, because there is some wiggle room here, and let them go at it. But I think there was no negotiation to begin with. It was just, here's what it is, here's what you're going to do, and I think, you know, I know this puts you in a bind as far as your negotiation, but you have seen what they've come to the table with, and I think it is something that they can work together and go, so.
Okay, I'm going to make a comment, and I'm going to let you guys talk, by the way, so have patience with me. You know, it's obvious they have to pay something, right? It's not going to be a nothing thing. So, and then the question is, how do you determine what the direct cost is? That's a thing. But I want to talk about risk. Even in friendships, you share risk. I share risk with my patients. When they come in and I treat them, they could be my worst enemy because they could sue me, even though I do my best. So I go out on a limb for them. So I share a risk with them. And I think that to get in a situation where if costs go up for the county and they don't for the townships, that's not fair. So I think that's a fair thing to expect, that risk gets shared. That's my point. Now, is it okay if I bring up the township people now? Guys care? Do you want to talk one at a time, or do you have a spokesman? What would you like to do? One at a time. Go for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your patience with all of us. Jay Zollinger, Acme Township Supervisor. I think one thing that we've not talked about in any of
Would
these
you talk in the
meetings-
mic?
I'm sorry, haven't talked about in these meetings is the fact we have townships out there that don't pay anything for service. Look at the sheriff's reports. We get them monthly. They're very good reports. Look at where calls are at. Compare them. Just because we have community policing officers don't mean we have more calls than those that don't pay. Now, I realize those that don't pay don't want to. That's a choice they've made. But there's cost to the county as whole for those townships that don't pay any extra. Our citizens do. We put up money. Dr. Johnson talked about it originally. That's a key element. What level of service do we want? I've spoken about that before. I think we have a great sheriff's department, great unit. They really are out there. They're seeing a lot. But the cost to the county is not just us that are paying. We're actually giving you some money. I think Dr. Johnson said we'd be glad to sit down and negotiate. I think there's some things that have been presented that aren't all appropriate, but we're glad to sit down and do that. That's an important thing to do. We've been talking about this. Each township, I think Glenn's going to talk about, has passed a resolution in support of where we're going here. Not the final number. We'd like it to be the final number, but we will. But there are townships out there, and there's big ones, that don't pay a dime extra. Look at their reports, how many calls they get. Somebody's paying for them. And that's everybody in every township that not only pays for a community policing officer, but pays county taxes. Very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And who's next?
Good evening, Glenn Lyle, East Bay Township Supervisor. You know, it was brought to light to me, what is the CPO program? Okay, it's a partnership. The townships are not getting police officers for the townships. If you took all of the CPO officers away, somebody's gonna go out and run them calls. Township isn't gonna pay a dime more, but somebody's gonna go out and do the calls. The county pays, I had it down here and I might be a little bit off, like $761,320 toward the CPO program. If the CPO program went away, the county could get, rather than 20 or 21 officers they got now for that price, they get 6.45 officers. It is a partnership. You got townships that do not participate anymore. They used to, they pulled them back. So when there's an emergency call out there, who goes there? The township that's paying the extra. This isn't anything that one township has got and they can put their arms around this and say, these are my police officers. Nobody that I've talked to ever wanted to dictate what those CPO officers do. It's a fancy name for them. I believe, number one, they put them out there because it was faster response time. It still had to be the sheriff department had to run the call. The township partnered with them. And I think it's been a pretty good partnership right along. you back up, it used to be, what's the biggest expense we got in this county right now? Your unfunded retirement. If we took that out of the equation, we wouldn't be sitting here having this discussion tonight. That isn't the township's fault that the county board chose not to pay 100% into that retirement fund years ago. That was county board's decision. Yet now we're putting it on the townships that are trying to be in a good partnership. You can make these numbers look whatever way you want to look. I mean, you can make numbers look however you want to look. I think what we came up with as a group was what the cost was for an officer. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pick numbers apart. There was, I think, $10,000 in one line item per officer for the records department. And when you're looking at the picture as a whole, yes, you do that. We're not. We're running some police officers to have them be in East Bay Township, Garfield, or wherever. Those officers go to specialized training that support Grand Traverse County, not a certain township. We pay for that. We're paying for their time. Everybody needs to keep this in mind. This isn't, to me, this whole process this year, or that started last year, is sticking it right to the townships. Bottom line, we read about it in the newspaper about the contract. And then I hear tonight, well, how come they don't want to negotiate? Negotiate? Hell, this was put out to the public that this is what the county's going to do. I just asked that everybody look at the numbers, look at it as a partnership, because that's what it is, and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll try not to repeat. My name is Chuck Korn. I'm the Garfield Township Supervisor.
How do we know you're not a Chuck Korn imposter?
There are a lot of people who want to be Chuck Korn, I understand. In any event, we have an agreement that was signed in 1992, originally for 7 officers. Eventually that expanded to 11. We now have, as of 2002, a special investigator or detective who we contribute towards. And along the way, we picked up a command officer. At this point, it's Lieutenant Barchef, who is an extremely fine officer, and we're very happy to have him. Throughout the years, the dollar amount was essentially based on a third-year patrolman. And whether you want to spend a few months putting together numbers that should take us in another direction has nothing to do with things. But a few weeks after we get the numbers, we're hot to go. So I guess Dave is overworked, because it took him a long time to get to the negotiation room, and then immediately wanted to hammer like a good car salesman. In any event, it's based on faith. It's based on trust. There is no contract for Lieutenant Barchef. So we have just added him in and paid the fee. Tom has set the rates over the years, again, assuming a third year. That was the basis of the agreement. We can play with direct costs all day long. They can be written and rewritten. And I'm sure it could be all kinds of fun, but I wouldn't mind sitting back down and discussing this with Dave. That would be the most appropriate thing. I do think if we continue to chase after a number that maybe 117,000 I saw on one sheet in your packet, might as well throw in the car and everything else. At some point, we just cut back on officers and the community loses. Now, some people don't like cops, and they don't want very many police in the street, so it's a victory for them. But let's work together. Thank you.
This is my favorite township official.
Pete Correa, Prentice Peninsula Township, and I am the rookie among these folks. I'm going to take one little short path that they have not taken yet. In the memo that you looked at on page 52 and 53 of your packet, there's a little problem in there that it wasn't completely expressed, that during that meeting, Tom Bensley talked at length about the cost of the whole sheriff's department, not just the people that are at these different townships. In that process, after I did some of the math and figured out how much the townships had given to the county, I think we probably have already paid for these officers. But we still feel very good about the process. We still feel like we should pay something, even if there are other townships that aren't paying anything and are still getting sheriff coverage. We think we're a part of this county, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, townships are a part of the county. Are they not? These aren't two separate areas. And so again, I'm looking at a little more simplistic. Tom did a great job explaining all the different costs. So I was bothered by when I read that the county was subsidizing us. I'll actually go the other way and say we're subsidizing the county. When you figure in the county taxes that we pay and the portion that goes towards the sheriff's department. The townships do like the CPA program. We have agreed at a cost, if you noticed on some of our contracts, at $77,509. I had not heard that number from anywhere in here. And the annual increase to be capped at the consumer price index, I heard CPI earlier in the meeting here today, with a maximum not to exceed 5%. I think it's important for you to know the complete story about that meeting. Lastly, I will say, having been a banker for a couple of weeks, I don't believe anybody in this room would sign a variable loan document with a bank and have them just decide what the increase should be every year. It's always tied to an item that the bank can't control. It should be the same thing here with the county. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody here. This could be potentially contentious, and everyone's done a good job, been faithful on Dave, too. So we're doing government's work, and we're doing a good job at it. So, okay, let's go on. Dave, you wanted to say something? Did you raise your hand, I thought? No?
No,
All
that was
right.
me.
That's Christine.
You don't look, okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I don't view what the townships and villages have passed as their final offer. It may be, but I don't view it as such. I agree with some of the comments that this should have been, the negotiation should have been started long before the budget process. And as most of you know, I did not vote for that 5%, primarily, well, in part because I didn't view it as a real negotiation. I do view it as a partnership. One good thing that I felt came out of the joint meeting that we had was that we did get the township and villages all to sit on at the same page, so we are going to be looking at just one contract. But I don't view this as their final offer, and I would look to our administrator to continue negotiations. But I don't, I just, the 5%, the board basically has said in the past that that's just, well, I've said what I had to say. I'm going to be quiet now.
Commissioner Klaus.
When this CPO program started, it was the federal government that provided funds, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how many years do they do that for?
3. Hey, 75, 50, and then 25%, and then it's all yours.
And so I guess they were able to get a program up that puts the county and the townships not at odds, but in a rough spot. I guess I just am always cautious when somebody gives you money and they get something started. This is like a great, like a pretty good drug deal, They just get you started on something and then they, pull the rug out. And here we sit.
Addicted?
Yeah, addicted to the CPOs. We love them. And, and we got to pay for them. But the federal government set us up to get started, so just want to make that comment.
Commissioner Krupa.
The reason we're addicted to the CPOs is because the citizens have spoke loud and clear. Public safety is why they live here. We live here because when we forget to grab our keys out of our car in the driveway, odds are it's still there in the morning. That's why we live here. We live here because our kids walk to the bus stop where we can't see them from our house. They've been loud and clear, and yes, we do represent the county, but we also represent the townships. The same people that voted for Pete voted for Dan. And that's who we hear from. We hear from the people that live here. I happen to represent the township with 13 of the CPOs. I mean, you better bet I've heard from people that live in the community. I also live in that community. Garfield Township contributes a little over $4 million to the county general fund. We all know that where the general fund dollars goes, predominantly to public safety. They now contribute an additional over $1 million for the CPO program. Don't you think Garfield would like to stick the partnership, put $1 million back in their fund? And you know what? When somebody in Garfield Township calls, the sheriffs are still going to come, just like in Long Lake and Union and Whitewater and the other ones that don't pay for the community police officer program. I'm all for looking at user fees and bringing revenue to where it should be. I'm the one that's been saying we got to change all the fees, when you choose to use something. But we've already paid as citizens into the county general fund through our township taxes an additional dollars from services that we could get from our townships, because that's the way Michigan's set up. Townships provide a lot of services that the county doesn't. So every dollar that goes to the CPO isn't a dollar in township-funded services for our citizens. So we are put in an unusual spot here. And as far as negotiating, I was the one that said this should have been done before it came to the board. This wasn't the place. But you were going forward and moving forward representing us with a contract that when we looked at it, several of us said, wait a minute. Why would we send you off to negotiate when it's going to, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the county board the final say on the contract?
Always.
Okay, so if several of us don't like the contract you're going forward from, wouldn't it be appropriate to say, so I don't agree that this shouldn't be happening and that this discussion shouldn't be happening? Because if you move forward with this, I specifically do not like this contract. It doesn't have a fixed rate in it. Whether it's the CPI or not, I don't care. It leaves a very vague term in there. And I would be happier if you weren't going forward with that. So it's okay for me to say that. I represent 1/7 of the townships, 2 of the townships with CPOs. It's okay to say that. We're not impeding a negotiation process. I hope we're helping it. Because if you move forward with this and then bring back a contract with this, I'm not gonna vote for it. And if in fact we are the final say, we should be able to have some voice in the negotiations. I don't think the townships subsidize the county.
Okay, Commissioner Wheelock.
The only point that I would have to make is that the County Board of Commissioners directed David with a 5% increase in the CPO contract because they approved the 2015 budget. There are different individuals sitting in this chair today, but the fact remains that the 2015 budget was drawn based on an increase of funding for the CPO program in the amount of 5%. So it's easy for us to sit here today and say, today, the members of the people sitting in this chair do not agree with the 5%. But the fact is, the 2015 budget was drawn at the direction of the Board of Commissioners with a 5% increase of the CPO cost. Those individuals aren't sitting in these chairs today, but the people that were elected in 2000 aren't sitting in these chairs today either. But we still are bound by some of the decisions that were made by those predecessors to the chairs that we're sitting in.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes.
I'd like to say, I think Dave has been earnest and worked really hard at this. I do want to go back and renegotiate, but I do appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you.
It's not been easy. I was talking to Larry Emmett about this the other day, and he says, why don't you guys just split the difference? And it is a partnership. I hope we can renegotiate, and I think you're trying to save the county money, and that's what we hire you to do. Plus, we also love you guys, and we need you, and you. So this is hard. So let's come together and get it fixed. Okay, any other comments?
David had something.
Yeah, as far as negotiating this contract, I need to know from this board, since they're going to make the decision, whether I should strive to achieve the full cost of the direct cost of the position, or whether I should find
a middle
a
ground.
percentage increase that limits the townships and basically assures that they never pay full direct costs, and the county picks up an ever-increasing portion of that over time. If that's what I'm supposed to do, I'd like to know that now.
Yes.
I believe that the contract says that the townships are responsible for the direct cost of an officer, and I believe that's where we should get to. And even at the 79,816 number that was proposed in the 2015 budget, we are acknowledging that they are not paying the full direct cost of the officer. So it's my intention, my belief, that the contracts are drawn from way back into the 90s, that the townships were going to be responsible for the direct cost of the officer, and the county would be responsible with general fund dollars to supplement everything else. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's the direction that I would expect that you will work toward with the negotiations. Whether we get to that direct cost over 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, I'm not sure that I care a lot, how long it takes us to get there, but I think that is still the goal that we need to be striving for.
Yes.
I agree with that, but you need to come up with a percentage that's mutually agreeable.
Okay.
I don't want you to say, this is it.
Do
it or not. And there's a percentage that's in there, headed in that right direction somewhere, that you're going to say this, and they're going to say, okay.
Two issues to negotiate. One is,
Yes.
how fast do we get there? The other is, what number do we use for the formula going from now and into the future?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's essential. Having a formula that everybody understands and everybody knows what it's going to be, and they can go back and go, oh, this is what it is. We've got the numbers right here.
I think Dave is right. We have to give him direction. We just can't let him be in limbo land. Go ahead.
It can't be based on last year's Board of Commissioners' passed budget.
That's okay with me.
We have one commissioner
Yeah.
sitting here who said she voted against the budget because of the 5% CPO.
Well, there were many reasons, but
Right, but 4 other seats are new.
I didn't.
So I don't agree with that, because who votes on this contract? It's the Board of Commissioners sitting here now. Our administrator was heading into negotiations with bad information because it wasn't communicated. We're communicating
But let's
now.
move forward.
So
We want
to
give
move
him
forward, we
direction.
tell him where we want to go, even if the budget was passed. Budgets are breathable and livable and moving. I've heard Sonny say that year after year after year as I've listened to the budgets. So this 5%, we're not locked in.
Okay, so what direction are we giving him?
I think Carol and I both have said, we're talking about a fixed rate that we're calculating this to go on, not just what the Board of Commissioners passes.
But is the
on a budget.
ultimate goal to get to the actual cost of an officer?
Direct
Which is a
cost.
moving target, which every year will be a different
That's
cost.
correct.
If healthcare went up 25% in 2016, it'd be a long shot to get to that. So we're consistently chasing this ball that's down the road. And if that's what the board wishes to do, then that's fine. But we do need to have this discussion and give some clear direction. I think I've been clear. I think we should agree on a number and a fixed rate to go up from there. And I don't want it tied to the budget. You know what else? I would love to make a motion to never use the term direct cost again in a CPO contract, because all it does is create it muddies
Well,
it
we can
all
define
up.
that.
We could all have a different idea what direct cost is. We're never gonna go anywhere with that. We need a base number. I mean, maybe Larry Inman's right. Maybe we should just split the difference and use that as our base number and go up X% from there, tied to something fixed. Mr. Correa is absolutely right. I wouldn't sign this deal. This is like the road commission deal, paying zero for a bridge. I mean, I'd be in on it too, you know? I mean, this is not, to me, a well-written contract that I would vote to approve.
So you want to rewrite the contract?
No, just that clause, the statement in it.
Yes.
I think what I would like to direct Dave to do is come up with a specific formula that Dave agrees upon and that the townships agree upon. The gap can be shortened there, and come up with a percentage. Again, that's somewhere in the middle, and I think it's probably it'll split it pretty close, but at least we'll
Okay,
be
so-
headed in the right direction with agreement, with numbers that are agreed upon, with numbers that are specific, written into the contract, that are easy to understand, that it's crystal clear to everybody exactly where that number comes from.
So I interpret that to mean that the direct cost number that Elisa wants to ban from our lexicon,
Whatever that number,
He who has
that
no
number has
name.
nothing to do with this contract. This has
It
to do
does.
with percentage increases.
no. Come up with a specific formula that says this is the direct cost next year for these officers. If the difference between what they paid last year and what the direct cost is the next year is humongous, put a cap there.
Okay. I can do
Find a
that.
number,
That-
find a
that was kind of
percentage
what
number
we-
that you agree with and they agree with, that is the cap.
All right. And that's the direction I
But
was
we'll be
moving in.
headed
I
in
just
the
want
right
to make sure
direction
that
and
that's the
it'll
right
be
direction
clear.
to move in.
Have we given him direction?
Giving him all kinds of directions.
No, but I don't want him to.
One way out the door is the
If
question.
you're going to ask him to do this stuff, we got to tell him what to do, and not a lot of maybes. So, what is our direction? Can someone articulate it?
I think Carol
I thought I did.
articulated it quite well.
I thought you
All
did
right,
too.
Dave, are you all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay, okay, I guess that's it, and I want to thank you guys, all of you, for working so hard at this issue. I'm going to move on, is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right. We're going to go to new business, recommendation for Parks and Recreation Commissioner from Ad hoc Committee.
Our chair was Commissioner Kropa.
We did interview, Commissioner Johnson, Max Bauer, and I interviewed two people for the position that was vacated by Commissioner Doran's resignation in January, and we chose Patrick McIntyre as our selection for the full board to consider. Pat is a Breakers parent, has utilized county parks in many ways. Him and his father did passageways travel, so many people know him from there. And he had a good background in business, a lot of interest in recreation. He was open to the ideas of budget challenges, like perhaps contracting out things in the Parks Department and thinking out of the box, and that was our selection. And we would ask the full board to recommend that he be chosen to fill that position, and that would be at, I suppose, now, but it would be officially done by the end of the month on the consent calendar.
Would that be a motion?
Yes, I would make a motion to recommend Patrick McIntyre for the vacancy in the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Is there a second?
Support.
Dr. Johnson, any discussion?
Let me just add, because I don't know if you said it or not, but that term expires at the end of this year, so.
It is a
he's-
partial term,
He is
Commissioner
just
Doran.
filling it till the end of the year, so.
All right, any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we come to the second public comment. Do we have to read the rules again, or no? All right. Anybody want to comment? Okay.
Is anyone left awake?
Oh, go ahead, yes, sir. I'm sorry, yep.
Just want to say thank you very much for all of your considerable attention. And again, I think As the old farmer said, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Set the number high enough and you'll lose cops. If they're not important to you, they're not important to drug dealers, they're not important to some people who would rather not have police or think we have too many police. But that's a decision that you're making.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we close public comment, and we come to Commissioner Committee reports. Okay, then we come to notices and announcements. Yes.
I do have a comment about something I did yesterday. Meals on Wheels has their Community Champions Week this week, where they invite public officials to come and deliver Meals on Wheels with their drivers. I did this yesterday. Did you do it today?
Yeah.
It was honestly the most pleasant afternoon I've had in a really long time. These people, they don't just deliver meals. They deliver care and love to these people that can't get out as much, that aren't mobile, and you should see their faces light up when you show up at the door. And they're surprised when a public official showed up too, just to say, hello, how are you, how are things going? They will talk for hours about
Gotta deliver those
the
meals.
war and all kinds of things. They're such valuable people in our community, and we don't get out to them enough. And I'm so grateful for the people that do deliver those Meals on Wheels. And the couple that I went with, they said they started out thinking we're making a difference in their lives, and they said they have been a blessing to us. They find it 10 times more enriching than they ever thought to go to these people once a week or twice a week, however often they go. And they learn about the people, and I just thought it was an incredible experience. They are such lovely people on both sides. So it was a really good experience. I would encourage anybody to do that if you get the chance.
Okay, any more announcements? Yes.
Well, I wanted to say thank you to Commission on Aging. I emailed Dave and I can't remember who else, but Chris Kramer perhaps. Anyway, Georgia Durga for sure, but there's a Garfield Township resident that had some surgery. No relatives, only a handful, well, you can count them on one hand, friends and have fingers left over. And he called me and said he didn't have groceries. So I went running over and found that he did have groceries. He had a refrigerator full of peanut butter cups. But in any event, I called Commission on Aging. They went over, sat down with him and me, and this has been over the last 2 days. And I checked on him yesterday. They checked on him today. He's had other people going in, checking on him, and lo and behold, this morning he was found in need of medical treatment, and he is back in Munson. But I have to tell you, Commission on Aging, I talked to them today. They're keeping me posted. They're helping me, and a friend, his other friend, set up maybe some social services for him, and I just think the staff has been wonderful, and I wanted to say so.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Do we have a closed session, Doctor?
No, we do not.
Okay. Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
We are.